Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, what's up, gang? Welcome to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily for another afternoon here in the Peg. Andrew Paterson, Michael Remis with you, and we got a fun show planned for you. Of course, we're looking forward to the draft at the end of June and the Memorial Cup on the weekend, as well as a little bit of an update on the previous selected Winnipeg Jets players and how they've done this year. No better person to join us to discuss all of that than Scott Wheeler from The Athletic. Scott's coming up in 25 minutes or so on the show. Then we'll have Brandon Rewucki. Very much looking forward to having Rue back on the program, get his take on the playoffs, and Paul Maurice going to the Stanley Cup final with the Florida Panthers. Of course, that's the big story in the National Hockey League after the sweep was completed last night down in South Florida, and the 8th-seeded Panthers sweep their way to the Stanley Cup final. Talk about that as well as some of the Winnipeg Jets topics around the offseason with Brandon. And then a little later on, it's been a minute since we've had our good friend Moe Khan, a WST favorite on the program. But Mo's been calling CEBL games for the last couple of years, and we thought with the Seabears beginning their existence on Saturday night with their big home opener at Canada Life Centre, we get a little primer on the CEBL overall, and a great reason to get Mo back on the program. So he'll do that and join us in the second hour of the show. So lots to get to with you. Should be a great one. Thanks to everyone that's with us. If you haven't already, and you're watching us on YouTube, hit that red subscribe button. And while you're at it, give us a thumbs up for the episode. And a big shout out to everybody listening on the podcast as well. Of course, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, go wherever you get your favorite podcasts and just put in Winnipeg Sports Talk and hit that subscribe button. Listen, just before we bring in Michael Remis to get things going, a big thanks to the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day. Coolbet Canada, Princess Auto, our friends at Assiniboia Downs, and the Gold Eyes, who are actually playing right now with that early school day game today. Modern Man, Aquatech, Manitoba Battery, Canadian Club, Wallace & Wallace, Vita Health Fresh Market, Nick and Nicky DQ, F Apparel, Consolidated Supply, BP, Royal Sports, Breezy Bend Country Club, Aikens Lake, and of course the great taste of Winnipeg's favorite local beer, Little Brown Jug. Let's get after it. Michael Remis, get in here. What's going on?
Just enjoying watching all the celebration videos and stuff from last night's Florida Panthers win. That's right. Paul Maurice headed back to the Stanley Cup final, Hustler. So how exciting is that? Who would have thought former Winnipeg Jets head coach Scott Billeck had the tweet, walking out of the Jets organization and into the Cup final. Congratulations to him and former Jets assistant coach Jamie Compon as well on the bench last night for that awesome Game 4 sweep.
Yeah, Billeck is not shy. He has tweeted numerous times. In fact, anytime the Panthers are mentioned, it's Paul Maurice walked out on the Winnipeg Jets and is now walking into the Stanley Cup final.
He's did a couple times.
Well, whenever you quote tweet yourself and say the same thing, and you know you're really emphasizing a point. And hey, listen, it is a big part of the story. I mean, Paul Maurice's journey to get to the Stanley Cup final it's incredible. Everything about this run of the Florida Panthers, I think, is bananas. This is a team that was a President's Trophy winning team last year, and they made massive changes in the offseason. Bill Zito, who's up for General Manager of the Year, along with Jim Nill and Don Sweeney, made one of the most aggressive trades we've seen in the NHL in a long, long time, trading a star player, a longtime Panther in Jonathan Huberdeau, and a top young defenseman, Mackenzie Weegar, and a pick to Calgary to get Matthew Tkachuk. And this run right now is exactly why they wanted Matthew Tkachuk. And listen, we can do, a redraft of the 2016 draft to see where Tkachuk would go. I mean, there's an argument. There's some people that would take him number one, frankly, over Austin Matthews with what he's going on right now. Even if you will give Matthews and his 60 goals the number one spot, hard not to imagine Tkachuk leaping over the likes of Patrick Laine and Pierre-Luc Dubois into that number two hole for the draft. But man, the guy he's such an impact player in so many ways throughout the season. But now in the playoffs, Remo, we're seeing every single aspect of what Matthew Tkachuk brings, what makes opposing fans absolutely hate the guy's guts. But my God, is he clutch. And he already had the 2 OT winners at the start of the series. And last night, there he was scoring the winner with 4 seconds left to break a tie. And listen, we'll get to the Canes in a minute and their hard luck story. But listen, Tkachuk, Bob, Pomo, there's a magic going on right now in South Florida. And we'll see if that magic continues after what we expect to be a pretty lengthy layoff before the Stanley Cup final gets going.
Yeah, Matthew Tkachuk, I mean, he's a player, the second leading scorer from the 2016 draft behind Austin Matthews, and I do wonder if you would take him number one. Bill Zito was nominated, it was announced yesterday, for GM of the year, and I can't imagine how difficult it would be, and I don't think a lot of GMs in the league would pull off this trade they did last year, where you're trading a franchise player who just had a career high in points in Jonathan Huberdeau. You're trading your number 2 defenseman, Mackenzie Weegar. You're trading a first-round pick after already trading away 2. I don't think anyone would do this trade, but he identified Matthew Tkachuk as a difference maker, as a superstar, and he certainly paid off with 3 game-winning goals. And I think we can say that, the Panthers, throughout the season, they were out of a playoff spot. We were kind of laughing at how they give away so many picks, maybe at their choice, switching up the head coach, when Andrew Brunette, had done such a great job last year, but they're in the Stanley Cup final. They made it, and they have a chance to win it all. And give full credit to Bill Zito, because I'm sure that was an extremely, tough decision. A lot of teams would just go with status quo after such a great season, be like, you know what? We got unlucky in the playoffs. We won the President's Trophy. He said, no, this isn't good enough. He made changes. They weren't good enough in the regular season, but in the postseason, they've dominated everyone. They had beat the Leafs in 5 games. They just swept Carolina. Boston, you won 3 in a row. You were down 3-1, and then you win. I mean, what an incredible playoff. So full credit to them. And yeah, they are riding Bobrovsky, who's living up to that contract, but you see how they play, and a guy like Sam Bennett, who's pissed everyone off all playoffs, making an impact, and all these like Brad Gudas, making an impact. They got guys playing hard in the playoffs here. So credit to them. But that trade, we'll be talking about that trade even more than we have been. And imagine being Jonathan Huberdeau right now, or Mackenzie Weegar. I mean, I don't think they get there with those guys in the lineup. But I don't know how you like.
Well, they don't get there without weird feeling. They don't get there without Tkachuk. No, they don't. I think we know that. And, that was the price that had to be paid. And, again, it's just wild. And when you go back to a year ago, I mean, that deal was made with Brad Treleving. They signed those guys to extension. Treleving is now out and may very well be the coach or the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs, who were eliminated by the Florida Panthers, who basically got in on the last day of the regular season, thanks to... And I sent this to you before. We talked about that crazy game where Pittsburgh, somehow all they needed to do was beat the Chicago Blackhawks. Well, they lost at home to one of the worst teams in the league, which gave Anaheim the inside track on Connor Bedard. That goal, Buddy Robinson, former Manitoba Moose, Buddy Robinson scoring the goal. And Florida gets in, and they have not looked back. First team ever as an 8th seed to hold 2 separate 3-0 leads in the same playoffs. And they got it done last night, sweeping the Carolina Hurricanes. And, like Florida gets in because of Pittsburgh losing. Pittsburgh fires everybody. And now, ironically, Florida takes out Toronto in round 2. All the chaos that's followed in Toronto, and it could be Kyle Dubas, the Leafs GM, that ends up as the general manager of the Pittsburgh Penguins, who could have been playing in the playoffs had they just beat the Blackhawks. Crazy how those things work.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of box scores on Twitter of that game where Chicago, who was terrible, beat Pittsburgh to keep them out of the playoffs and let Florida get in. As you said, highlights of the goal. I think there's other goals that I've seen highlights of from that game. What a legendary game that you talked about this yesterday, Mike, that changed NHL history. You're wondering what could have been, But credit to the Florida Panthers. Major 96 vibes here with the hot goalie, the rats on the ice. People are forgetting that about why the rats are thrown on, because Scott Mellenby killed a rat in the dressing room in 1996, and it's still going. So I do love that, and I did enjoy seeing Keith Tkachuk celebrating as well in the stands. So I'm if you're covering the Stanley Cup final, what a dream series it could be between Vegas and Florida.
I see waiters in the chat saying, will Hustler criticize Brind'Amour for his delusional post-game comments? I'm not going to get on Rod Brind'Amour for that. I mean, listen, I feel for Rod Brind'Amour. I think that he was exactly right. I mean, you have to, those guys are going back and he's looking in the mirror going, what the hell else did we need to do to even win a damn game? I mean, they lost a 4 overtime game with their goalie standing on their head. They lost another overtime game. And I knew that they were not going to quit last night. I mean, they were down 2-0 early. A lot of other teams, including, unfortunately, the one that we follow here in Winnipeg, I don't think had that pushback, if you will, to get back in the game. And, I mean, they tied the game late. It looked like it was going to overtime again. And then Matthew Tkachuk was the difference maker. I mean, I feel for Carolina. I think they deserved a better fate. I'm not necessarily winning the series, but when we talk about sweeps, I don't know about you, Remo, but I'll actually back Rod Brind'Amour. That was not your run-of-the-mill playoff sweep in the NHL. That was four of the closest games you could possibly have that somehow all went the Panthers' way. And as they say, everything's coming up Paul Maurice right now.
I agree with you. I think Arda Okel tweeted this. There's been, 4 series in NHL history that were a sweep where every game was a 1-goal game. Sorry, 6th time in NHL history, which was a sweep where every game was a 1-goal.
Was the Jets-Ducks series one of those?
No, but there was a 2018 Vegas series. I think it was the first round against LA. I looked it up because it wasn't against the Jets. 2003 Anaheim, 99 Dallas, 93 Montreal, 68 Montreal. For Carolina, I think a lot of people picked Islanders to upset them in the first round. Oh, they're missing Svechnikov, they're missing Pacioretty, Teravainen gets injured, and they push through. You thought upstart Devils were going to beat them. They beat the Devils. 6 games. And last night, Jacob Slavin, one of their top defensemen, they have so many defensemen. Who's the top one? Is it Burns or Slavin? Take your pick. He gets out, and then Burns takes the slapper, hits Marty Necas in the leg, and he gets carried off. They showed Rod Brind'Amour on the bench. He looked like he was gonna cry. He's like, "What am I supposed to do here?" We're already missing all these guys. Teravainen came back. I don't know if he was necessarily 100%. You lost your top D on a brutal hit by Sam Bennett, which was clean, as much as it pains me to say, after he pulled off the wrestling moves on the Maple Leafs. That was a devastating hit on Slavin, and hopefully he's okay.
The rock bottom he did in the Toronto series, that was more like an edge spear, if you will. I mean, he basically just went right through Slavin. I mean, as hard, but as clean a check you'll see. And that's kind of a trademark of what Florida's doing right now.
I will say that hit also kind of reminds me of a clean version of the Mark Scheifele hit on Jake Evans with a guy coming around the net.
Version?
And another guy. You look at the speed he was. I don't know if he took he came in with speed. It wasn't charging, but he came with a lot of speed and just put the guy on his ass with a clean hit. And look at this Florida team. I mean, I lost my train of thought here, but they're pretty incredible what they're doing. But for Carolina, every game is a 1-goal game. You got goalied. You lost a 4 overtime game. I mean, they were right there. I don't think those comments are delusional at all.
Yeah, I mean, hey, was Florida the better team? Absolutely.
Yes.
But was it an incredibly tight series that went 4 games? Yeah, it was. That being said, the Panthers are on. And listen, credit where credit is due. Bill Zito, for his hiring of Paul Maurice, that was heavily criticized throughout the year, especially when the Panthers were struggling. And Maurice said, I was listening to a clip of Maurice's introductory press conference last summer. And Mike Kelly, who is one of the guys I respect the most in the business as far as his analysis of the way teams play. He basically said he's taking on a President's Trophy team that was not built to win in the playoffs. And the Stanley Cup playoffs are a different beast in the regular season. And that is why they brought Paul Maurice in. And it broke down the differences from the way that the Panthers played last year to playing this year. And, as great as Tkachuk and Bobrovsky's been, it was sort of singling out Paul Maurice for some credit in the work that's been done to get them to where they are. And two of the things that they did, about as little as any team in the league last year, was dump the puck in and dump the puck out. And right now, they've gone from like 30th in the league for dump-ins to about 12th or 11th in the league, and far more in the dump-outs as well, which is at the end of the day making the smart play, not doing too much, not getting cute. Because listen, the Panthers were able to score with the best of them last year, but unfortunately, you can get into those habits that don't cut it come playoff time playing against the best teams in the league. And, they seem to have been built throughout the year. And listen, they dodged some bullets, and some would say they were very fortunate even to be in the playoffs. But once they got there, the style of play that Maurice has been preaching and has been getting the buy-in from that roster top to bottom is now paying dividends right now.
I said this earlier in the playoffs. It really reminds me of, remember the Jets played the Oilers in that sweep, and they were playing physical. They were all over them. Pionk was all over McDavid, who was the coach of that team, Paul Maurice. But the Jets weren't able to keep up that style when they played Montreal. I don't know what it was, even this year with the Jets. What they played great, played the bonus style for the first half of the season, then really had a big lull. Florida's kept their foot on the gas the whole series, and that is one thing that does remind me of Paul Maurice. Maybe I'm wrong, Hustler, on that one, but you're seeing a sweep. Every game is a one-goal game. The goalie stands on his head. Was that not the blueprint for the Jets sweeping the Oilers?
Pretty close. Pretty close. The one thing I'll say about the Panthers and the way that they play and how it ties into Maurice is that they've got some Maurice-type players. I mean, let's face it, he's loving having Sam Bennett on his team. And as much as he said all that stuff about Tkachuk when he was a member of the Flames and knocked Scheifele out, I mean, he dreamed. I'm sure a big reason why he wanted to come there was to have a guy like Matthew Tkachuk on his team that really creates the culture in that room and on the ice. And you've got an incredible two-way center, one of the best in the league in Barkov. But the other guys, Verhaeghe, and then their blue line with, wackos like Gudas. I mean, they can be physical. They will make you play. And once they bought into this style of, we are going to dump the puck in a little bit more. We are going to go in and we are going to win more battles than the other team. I don't know if there's a stat on that, Remo, but just basically your success in winning those puck battles, that might be the biggest stat or biggest analytic number right now when it comes to winning in the playoffs right now, because it really does come down to a battle of will in a lot of cases between teams that have already proved themselves playoff ready when you get to this point in the standings. And tell you what, I think it's pretty clear and probably a big part of the frustrations that Maurice had. And let's face it, Rick Bowness had these same things go on in the second half of this year, was the inability for any coach to really get the sort of buy-in from the players that they needed to have buy-in here in Winnipeg to do the type of things that the Florida Panthers are doing right now. And now, listen, is this Jets team, do they have those sorts of players that can play that style? Certainly that can be debated. But I think we saw a team that was far more committed to it in the first half of the season when they were winning, as opposed to use a Rennieism, trying to crank out the snake charmer offense at times and have a lot of fun right now. Sometimes winning and the grind to do it isn't that much fun, but it works. And that's why the Panthers are playing for the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, full credit to the Florida Panthers. And there was a lot of talk, Huss, after the game when they presented the Wales trophy. I think we got to put this to bed. Touch the trophy, celebrate your wins. Full credit to Barkov for grabbing it and skating around. Never been seen before in the NHL, but Matthew Tkachuk had a nice quote. He said, no one thought we'd even, get out of the first round or get here. I think you do. Oh, here's the quote. Last thing we're going to do is be superstitious about not touching it. Nobody said we were even going to make the playoffs. I think it's cool to touch it, carry it around, and take pictures with it. We earned that thing, and not a lot of teams make it to the Cup final. You should celebrate it, so credit to them. I think maybe if they made the Cup final last year and lost and then get back there, maybe then you'd be like, no, we're not touching it this year, but go ahead and enjoy. Like you see baseball they're celebrating after winning like the play-in game with a champagne party. We need more of that in hockey.
Yeah, full-fledged parade mode for winning a wild card game in Major League Baseball. Yeah. I'm with you, though. I'm with you. I mean, listen, they're at their home rink. They've won a historic game in front of their fans. You've won a trophy. Grab the thing. Now, Tkachuk, I believe, grabbed it first and then gave it to Barkov. And Barkov started skating. I thought they were actually going to start skating around the rink with it, almost like you would after winning the Stanley Cup. That being said, they didn't do that. They took it into they took it into the room, and I'm sure then did whatever with it. But yeah, I mean, listen, not touching anything else. It goes to, I think, a level of cynicism. I think now with with fans and players that everything is just about there's only one champion and everyone else are losers. Hell no. I mean, you do a run that the Florida Panthers have had, regardless of what happens in the Stanley Cup final. There's a lot to celebrate right now, and today's a great day to do it. Last night was a great day to do it. Now they'll get ready for Vegas. Speaking of Vegas, Reem, tonight, I like Vegas to end this series against Dallas in a similar 4-0 sweep, and that could mean a long, extended break before we get going with the Cup final.
When's the Cup final? I was wondering about that. They probably didn't schedule in that they were both going to be sweeps, but I think Dallas is done. They came unhinged last game. Jamie Benn, an hour after the show ended, announced the 2-game suspension. I think you predicted 2 games, right?
Yep.
You did, so I'll give credit to you. I don't know if there were odds on that or what. Maybe they should start offering that, but that's a big loss for them. He's their captain. He's had a nice season. And Vegas, I think this is going to be a great Stanley Cup final. Vegas, Florida, 2 teams that have played a similar style. I remember Vegas, just the hitting and the forecheck against Winnipeg in that first round was awesome. And Vegas, I feel like they haven't been given enough credit. Even though they were the first place team, I don't think they have a super. I guess Jack Eichel is really having a breakout playoffs, and Pietrangelo is a number 1 defenseman. So I take back they don't have a superstar, but I do feel like they play that team game where they can roll 4 lines at you, and it might be a different guy doing it every night. So this is kind of a premature look ahead to the Cup final, but seems like this one is just about over.
Well, as I said, I think we're going to have plenty of time to do that, assuming that Vegas gets in. I mean, I don't think that they could possibly start the Cup final until as early as a week from today. So, as I said,
what are we going to do for a week?
Well, we're going to, what we'll do? We'll do exactly what we're going to be doing a lot of the rest of this month, and that's look ahead to what's going on around the rest of the league and the NHL draft coming up in Nashville. And we got a big announcement to make on that as well coming up in the next couple days. But coming up in just a second, we're going to catch up with Scott Wheeler, who's got a ton of great draft content along with Corey Pronman at The Athletic. And interested to hear from him, not only on the upcoming draft, but what he's seen and heard about the Jets' top prospects from last year's draft in Brad Lambert. And Scott will be heading out to the Mem Cup, as well as Rutger McGroarty and Elias Salmonson. I think you're going to want to hear this as well. The defenseman the Jets picked in the 2nd round. Before we bring in Scott Wheeler, don't forget, folks, Sunday afternoon is the grand opening of the new Modern Man Barbershop on Plessis Road. From 12 to 5, receive a haircut for $9 with proceeds to Prairie Wildlife Rehab Center. Plus, the first 100 people get a free lunch from their neighbors at Crave and Kitchen Deli. I was at the grand opening and got a cut for the new Pembina location a couple weekends ago. And it was just great. I mean, awesome crowd out there, wonderful store, great people. And that food was awesome too. So if you need a haircut, you're out on the east side of the city, plan to get out to Modern Man Barbershop, Plessis, from 12 to 5. $9 cuts, again, proceeds to Prairie Life Rehab. Hey, it's going to be pushing 30 degrees all weekend long. We're thinking summer right now in Winnipeg, and why not make 2023 the year you take the plunge with Aquatech? Visit aqua-tech.ca to design your own custom pool. Their team can provide on-the-spot pricing from designers as well as financing options that suit you. And whole home renovations start with Aquatech as well. With thousands of renos as their foundation, let them upgrade any space in your home. Aquatech is ready to make your reno dreams a reality. Learn more about design, pricing, and financing options at aqua-tech.ca. Well, May long weekend's behind us, and that is the official kickoff to summer. But Manitoba Battery has extended their kickoff to summer sale for one more week for you cottage folks, campers, boaters, golfers looking to take advantage of the best prices in town on batteries. You've got another week to do it. Here we go. Deep cycle batteries starting at $105. 6-volt golf cart batteries $170, and 8 volts are $180. And in all cases, you'll get an additional refund back of $10 to $17 for your old batteries when they're returned. And they can be delivered within the perimeter at no extra cost. Compare any of the big box stores. Not only will you not have to wait in line, but you'll have to pay $30 to $50 more per battery. Most convenient service with free delivery on any order over $60 in town. And you'll always get the best prices at Manitoba Battery. The sale goes until this Saturday, May 27th. For more info, go to manitobabattery.com or pay them a visit. See Donnie and the gang down at 1026 Logan Avenue. And we got Bomber preseason football on the road this weekend. And next week, back at IG Field, the wait is just about over, Bomber fans, to be meeting friends around the rum hut and enjoying a delicious Canadian club or CC and Ginger premixed cocktail, now available in cans, both at Bomber games and at your local Manitoba liquor marts. You can find CC and Ginger in the 473 milliliter cans at local beer vendors as well. And you'll definitely be able to get it at IG Field, as Canadian Club is Canada's favorite whiskey and the official spirit of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. All right, we will talk some hoops and get ready for the Sea Bears opener in the second hour of the program with Moe Khan, Brandon Rewucki on some NHL and Jets off-season talk. But right now, getting ready for what will be a very interesting month for the Winnipeg Jets and a big week in Nashville at the NHL draft. Let's bring in athletic prospect analyst and good friend of the program, Scott Wheeler. Scott, what's going on? How are you?
I'm doing well. Today's a bit of a podcast gauntlet, if you will, for whatever reason. I've booked like 5 or 6 of these, so you guys are right in the middle of that, and I think that's the sign that it's draft season. It's funny, I don't hear from guys like you during the year, and then suddenly here I am. So
hey, well, you've been kind enough to come on a few times this year just to talk about a little bit more about some of the Jets prospects, but obviously right now, and we'll get to the actual draft in a minute. Very interesting times here in Winnipeg, and I think so much of what happens over the next few weeks could absolutely have a massive impact on what the Winnipeg Jets do at the draft, because not only are we talking about the possibility of going and making the selections, but there's a bunch of players, Scott, that could potentially be on the move. I mean, I know you're focusing on the prospects, but you and Corey were talking about the Jets' needs going into the draft and the Athletic this week. What do you make of just the Jets' situation, where they are organizationally, and how significant the moves could be made over the course of this next month?
Well, it certainly feels like they're at some kind of a tipping point one way or the other here, especially with some of the pending free agents and Wheeler and Scheifele, and obviously you've got Dubois and sort of chatter about him right around the corner. And this does feel like it may be the end of an era and the sort of dawn of a new one. And as far as that goes, I think they're actually in a fairly well position, or sort of fairly well positioned, if you will, in terms of the youth that's coming. I'm a big, but you guys know this, but I've been, since he was 16 years old, a huge believer in Cole Perfetti. I think he's going to be a point per game player in the league and a true sort of star winger. We'll see whether it happens for him at center and all of that. But no, big believer in Cole. I like Chaz a lot. Obviously, the health issues with Chaz are concerning, and they are reoccurring and different varieties now too. So that's something that he's going to have to sort of overcome. He's going to have to stay healthy and get back on track. But Brad, I mean, we were just talking before I joined on. I'm off next week to the Memorial Cup to watch Brad play, and he's had a really nice run. Has been a hugely important piece of the team that I believe are the Memorial Cup favorites in Seattle. Rutger McGroarty, strong freshman year at Michigan, and there are pieces there. That's 4 guys that I think could be good, solid, sort of top 9 NHL players. So that piece of it, I think, is they're in a good spot, especially for a team that's been a fairly consistent playoff team for a number of years now. Typically, you don't still have a cupboard of 4 or 5 legitimate prospects when you're in that spot. So that's a testament to drafting well. They've hit on some of those sort of mid first round picks, those late teens, early 20s picks. They've done a good job with them. I still think Billy Heinola is going to join that group and become an everyday sort of number 4, number 5 defenseman kind of thing. So there's a foundation there. If they decide to sort of really hit a hard reset button here, there are some young pieces to continue to sort of shape the next phase in their I don't want to call it a rebuild, but the sort of that next chapter for them. There are pieces to the puzzle, and they've got another pick coming up at number 18 that should add to that if they decide to hang on to it. So there's a foundation there. They're not in the position that say the Pittsburgh Penguins are, where once the Malkin Crosby era is over, they have not drafted well, and they have not drafted hardly at all, and there is absolutely nothing waiting in the wings to help them sort of smooth out losing some core pieces. So they're in a decent spot that way.
Scott, you just mentioned 2 players that I think are really exciting Winnipeg Jet fans, Brad Lambert and Rutger McGroarty, the 2 first-rounders from last year. And I'll add in Elias Salmonson, who they took in the 2nd round, that, talking with some people in Jets player development, very excited about. I mean, what can you tell us about just the last year for those 3 players from your eyes, and how they've progressed as to moving on, hopefully to become contributing NHLers?
Yeah, well, Sal Monson's a really interesting one. I had a chat with one of his coaches over in Sweden last week for a different story I was doing on Axel, Sandy, and Pellikka, and in that process just really got chatting about Sal Monson, and they just wanted to, both the folks within the organization just wanted to wax poetic. They felt that before he got injured that he was one of their best defensemen in the SHL last year, and that the quote that he used was a good one, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he told me basically, I've seen good players become great players. I've never seen average players become great players as quickly as Sal Monson did last year, and sort of said that they didn't even have even lukewarm expectations for him. They were kind of down on him, and then he was tremendous before some injury troubles sort of got in the way of his season. So he's going to be a big part of the World Junior team on home ice in Sweden, in Gothenburg, this coming December. They're going to have a really strong blue line. That Swedish blue line from top to bottom will be impressive. It'll be the strength of that team. And I expect him to be a big part of that. So that's a nice boost. He's a kid who played really well in junior on sort of in the early years of his career, always played above his age group, was coming into his draft year believed to be sort of a true top prospect. And then didn't fall off, but became kind of that second round type prospect where he was ultimately picked, right? So for him to now regain some of that cachet and some of that status that he had prior is a really positive step for him and a positive step for the Jets pool. So there's definitely reason for optimism with Elias. As far as Brad and Rutger go, I mean, Lambert's the speed and the skill, we've all seen it. I know it wasn't consistent in the AHL, but he was put in a tough position last summer. From a conversation I had with Lambert for a Q&A that I did with him, last summer was really his first year training. He came over and stayed in Aurora, which is actually where I'm from, and trained with Gary Roberts at St. Andrews College. And it was really the foundation of him trying to sort of build something for himself. And if you've seen him, he's a pretty skinny kid. He's a tall kid, but he's a pretty skinny kid still, really athletic. But there's a lot that's still going to change about him, his body, his game, And I think just spending the second half of this year playing at the junior level, playing with his peers, getting sort of really feeling good about himself again, I think was the right thing for him. And I expect he's going to score some big goals in the Memorial Cup and be a sort of timely key contributor there. He doesn't dominate games at the WHL level in terms of every shift and all over the puck and that kind of thing. But his skill flashes 4 or 5 times a game, and it sort of opens your eyes. So that's who he is. He's going to play with speed and skill, and I think he's going to frustrate some coaches along the way. And I know he's a competitive, fiery kid too, though, and I know he wants to prove people wrong in terms of rounding out his game a little bit. So I'm really interested to see where he takes it and what kind of career he might have, because I think it can go in one of several directions. And then Rutger's just going to be a good player. That's who he is. He's a good player. He's been a good player at every level. He's strong on his stick. He's got the pro frame already. He's a super charismatic kid that coaches love. He's just one of those guys who's just going to be a solid NHL winger. I don't think he's going to have the sort of first line upside that Cole Perfetti has, for example. But I do believe he's going to be a really just a good, well-rounded scoring winger in the middle six there, and be kind of a 40, 50-point player and be a key contributor to a good team. So I've got a lot of respect and admiration for Rutger. And I don't know if you guys have ever had him on your show, but I'd put him right at the top of my Jets power rankings in terms of the quotability and the talking and the way he communicates. He's a pretty charming kid.
We certainly have had him on the program, and I can tell you that it didn't take long for Jets fans that tune into our program to fall in love with this kid. And we'll have to wait another year to get him here, but people are very excited about, what he'll bring on the ice and off the ice, just as maybe a guy that can sort of usher in, even though be a rookie, a very young player. I mean, a new attitude around the team, and and he's really been a culture carrier every single team that he's been on, and I'm sure that's the hope here in Winnipeg. Scott, as far as the draft goes, since we spoke last, the ping pong balls were dropped. When it comes to franchise-changing moments, how significant was those balls dropping in the favor of the Chicago Blackhawks? So they're on the clock for Connor Bedard.
Yeah, I mean, it really can't be overstated how big of a moment that was for the Blackhawks. They are, as we know, probably this year entering this next season, and we'll see what they do in free agency and whether this changes what they do in free agency. But had they entered next season, give or take with the roster that they'd finished this season with, they were going to be the most bare bones team in the league. And to add a piece like that to a team that was empty, and not just empty in terms of the roster, but the depth, everything at the professional level. They've actually already had a pretty strong pool. They made 3 first-round picks last year, drafted Frank Nazar, Kevin Krasinski, Sam Rinzel, sort of rejuvenated that pool in a pretty quick order. Lucas Reichel, an excellent, excellent prospect who may get to play in the future on the wing with Connor Bedard and be a sort of top 6 player for them. So they had some young pieces, but I mean, we saw the roster, right? It was Max Domi and Tyler Johnson, and it was pretty grim. And I almost think that them landing Bedard and how good he's capable of being, the fact that they don't have contracts tied up long-term, they don't have bad deals signed, they don't have anybody other than Seth Jones on a 6-7 year contract, that's a really advantageous position to be entering in a player of Connor Bedard's caliber, because they don't have to tear anything down. They've got a blank slate in terms of signing free agents and bringing the right players in to surround him with. And you hope that he can grow organically with a really, really impressive group of prospects, and not just with him, but they've got another first-round pick again this year. They've got 2 more first-round picks again next year, and they've got 2 more first-round picks the year after that. So they're really well positioned for these next 3 drafts. They've got multiple second-round picks in each of those drafts. They have more draft capital than any other team in the NHL. And you're going to build it around a player who I believe is going to score 50 goals and 100 points in the NHL in the prime of his career. And that's a pretty rare thing. So I mean, he's special. I've been doing, this is the 10th draft. I've been doing this kind of on a full-time basis. And outside of McDavid, he's the best prospect I've watched at that age. And on top of that, we can forget that he's actually a summer birthday. So he's on the younger, believe it or not, on the younger side of this draft class.
Do you think that Kyle Davidson, the fact that they have Bedard, might change their thinking as far as accelerating this plan a bit? I mean, with an all-world player like that on his ELC, I mean, you do want to make the most of that. And I can't help but think that this might open up some new possibilities to maybe get a little bit more aggressive as to adding to this roster, which, as you mentioned, was pretty much scorched earth. I mean, talent-wise, the worst in the National Hockey League last year.
Yeah, they're not. I certainly think that it's going to mean that they sign 2 wingers this offseason that are capable of playing with him and making sure that he's in a good situation. He's not going to start next year playing with Tyler Johnson. Like, that's just not going to be the outcome. So I think you look at the free agent pool, you look at guys like Ryan O'Reilly, Tyler Bertuzzi, guys who play with not an edge. I mean, I wouldn't say O'Reilly plays to an edge with him, but guys who can support him, guys who can lift him up, who can sort of correct for some of his mistakes, who can get pucks to him and do some of the dirty work, veteran types. I think a guy like a Bertuzzi or a Ryan O'Reilly makes a lot of sense for them. And certainly in O'Reilly's case, it's not going to come with a long-term commitment. So they're not handicapping at the next phase when they truly want to add in free agency by adding a guy like a Ryan O'Reilly on a 2 or 3 year deal, given his age. So that's the approach I think they take. I don't think that means they're speeding up their process, though. I think they fully expect that they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league next year. I don't think they're in any rush to sort of add to that, sort of quickly build around him. They're going to let this happen. By all accounts, Davidson is committed to letting this happen organically, letting him develop with their young core, presenting opportunities to players like Reichel, players like Korchinski, and just sort of building it around Bedard so that when he's in the prime of his career, when he's 22, 23, and he's playing at his best, then they can sort of push all in around a good young team. And I think that's how you'll see this play out. But they still have to sign players. They still need to ice a roster. They still need to get to the cap floor. All of that's going to happen. And I think veteran types like an O'Reilly or Bertuzzi could make a lot of sense for them.
Scott Wheeler of The Athletic is with us, getting ready for a draft week in Nashville at the end of next month. Scott, we've heard a lot about this draft class for a long time. And, many of us sort of, maybe lazily talking about it as the Bedard draft, but it's much more than Connor Bedard. Now that you've had another year to scout these players as we get ready for next month to hear their names called, how would you categorize the overall strength of the draft class of the NHL of 2023?
I think it's, again, like Bedard is the best prospect, David. I think this is the best draft class since 2015. Obviously, 2015 was special. People always talk about 2003, and I think there's an easy argument to be made that 2015 is going to go down as the best sort of modern draft in the history of the NHL. So, I mean, it wasn't just McDavid, right? It was Eichel and Marner and Rantanen and Kyle Connor and Matt Barzal and Thomas Chabot, and you go down the list. It was Travis Konechny, on and on, right? So, that's what this feels like. That's what this feels like to me. If Bedard can be your McDavid and guys like Adam Fantilli and Leo Carlsson and Will Smith and Matvei Michkov can become as good as I think they're capable of becoming, and which in the case of all 5 of those players is point per game, front line, first line players, then suddenly you're in that mix with 2015 and you just need a few guys elsewhere in the draft to hit. And I actually quite like the depth of this draft. This is a draft that's thinner for sure on defense than we're used to. This is a thinner draft than we've seen in a few years on defense. There are really 2 kids at the top that were there all year. Has been one other, Tom Willander of Rogla, who has sort of worked his way into that conversation with Axel Sandian-Pellikka and David Reinbacher. And then you've got a Russian in Mikhail Gulyayev, who could well be available at 18, who's a very offensive-minded but kind of smaller defenseman. So they've outside of it being really only 4 or 5 quality defensemen in the first round, which is a very small number, it's at forward. It's a tremendous draft. And that's not just because of the 5 that I talked about at the very top. It's also Zach Benson and Oliver Moore and Gabe Perreault, players with legitimate sort of star top of the lineup upside in their own right, who would be top 5 picks in other drafts. Even going back to last year, I'm not convinced that Zach Benson of the Winnipeg Ice is any less of a prospect than Juraj Slavkovsky and Shane Wright and the players and Logan Cooley who were picked at the very top of last year's draft, right? So it's an impressive group. You're going to see that if the top 5 hit, or if 4 of the top 5 hit, you're going to have franchise-making players in those guys. And then even further down, I think at forward in particular, you're going to see a few stars sort of emerge out of this draft, and it's going to be a sort of, in history's context, I think it's going to be a really impressive group.
Scott, in the latest mock in The Athletic, you and your colleague Corey Pronman flipped a coin, so you got to pick Connor Bedard. It was probably the easiest part of the entire exercise, and then went back and forth with first-round picks. Adam Fantilli, who is, I believe in most cases, is thought to be the consensus number 2 pick, went off the board there. How automatic is he at number 2? And once number 2 is taken, in your mind, how many guys are in the mix for those other top 5 spots and potentially going number 3 like Will Smith did in your pool?
Yeah, so Adam, less and less convinced that he's going to be the guy at 2. If I were setting the betting lines, he would still be my betting favorite, if you will. I still think he's the most likely player to go to Anaheim, and not just because of the pedigree, what he accomplished with the Chicago Steel, winning a title there and producing like he did as a teenager in the USHL, which is a very difficult league to score in, a tougher league than the CHL is to score in. But also, obviously, this season is history-making freshman year, the Hobie Baker at the University of Michigan. He was brilliant. He was sensational. It was Jack Eichel-esque. So that's a big factor. Plus the Anaheim piece, they like physical. They've drafted a lot of guys who sort of play hard, heavy, competitive styles. Nathan Gaucher was their first-round pick last year, certainly plays that style. Mason McTavish certainly plays that style. And Fantilli would just fit in there. He has that element that those other players in the top 5 don't, in terms of he can hurt you, he can finish a hard check, he can play in the dirty areas. I had his coach sort of use a line with me earlier in the year of, he can play it in the front yard or in the back alley. Like, there's just a different sort of snarl and meanness that's underneath Fantilli's skill game that the other players lack. And I think that could be a draw for Anaheim. But in saying that, Leo Carlsson is number 2 on a lot of teams' lists. There are still teams who think Matvei Michkov is the second best prospect in this draft and the closest in talent to Connor Bedard. And there are even teams now that think that Will Smith should go number 2 or number 3. So it's not a foregone conclusion that Fantilli's the guy there. And then after that, to answer the second part of your question, it's going to be interesting. I think Will Smith makes a lot of stylistic sense for the way that the Columbus Blue Jackets have drafted and for what they need in terms of a true playmaking, point-producing center, which is at his core what Will Smith is going to be. He would really sort of a similar player type as well to a Johnny Gaudreau and a Kent Johnson, who they already have there, and it would really complement well shooters like Kirill Marchenko and Patrick Laine. So I think Will Smith makes a lot of sense at 3, but if Anaheim doesn't take Fantilli, I think Fantilli makes a lot of sense for them as well for different reasons. So it will be interesting. And then if suddenly Leo Carlsson's available 4, which again, I don't think is a foregone conclusion. I think he could go 2 or 3. But if Leo Carlsson's available 4, then the San Jose Sharks, I'm certain, would not hesitate in taking him as well. So that piece of it, those 4 guys, I all expect are going to go top 5. I don't think you're going to see any sort of shocking surprises there. I don't think you're going to see a faller from that group. The real question mark is Michkov. Where does Michkov go? Who feels comfortable taking the swing on a kid who's not going to be coming over here in all likelihood until 2026? Who feels comfortable taking the swing on a small, not particularly fast winger? It's always the wingers that fall, right? It's always the Cole Caulfields, the Alex DeBrincats. Last year, we saw Joakim Kemmel and Jonathan Lekharmaki fall. Push comes to shove at the draft. Teams like to take centers and defensemen. That's just the way it goes. So Michkov's, there's a lot of question marks on one hand about Michkov, and then for me, I'm in the group that believes he's the second most talented player in this draft, and that he's got a chance to put up 90 to 100 points in a season and be one of the most exciting players on television in the league. And he's a special prospect, the best Russian prospect since Ovechkin and Malkin went back-to-back 1-2 in 2004, and that's 20 years ago now. So a pretty unique talent that I think if he does slip is going to make whichever team is comfortable taking that risk and getting him over here. If they can get him over here, I have very few worries about him becoming a truly high-end player.
Scott, if Michkov was from Medicine Hat instead of Moscow, how would he be viewed differently going into Nashville?
I think there is some of that. I truly believe that. I think there's some of that in the perception that he's a one-dimensional player as well. There are teams that are worried about his play off the puck. And while I think he's not going to be a driver in terms of sort of dragging his teammates into it and the competitiveness, I think he's more competitive than he lets on. And I do think if his birth certificate looked different and if he'd played in the WHL and scored 150 points like Connor Bedard had this year, which I think he quite well may have at that level, it would be a different conversation. It would be a different sort of context in terms of the way that people describe him and talk about his game. I think the same goes had he played in two U18 Worlds. We forget he didn't play in Germany or in Switzerland in U18 Worlds. The last time we saw him on the international stage was in Texas 3 years ago at U18 Worlds, and he nearly broke the scoring record and did it as a double underager. So had he been at U18 Worlds, even one of the U18 Worlds in Germany or Switzerland, and had he played at any of the World Juniors, of the last two World Juniors in Edmonton and then the most recent World Juniors in Halifax, I think he could have been putting up 15, 16 points in those tournaments as well, pushing the crazy numbers that Connor Bedard put up at this last one in Halifax. And then we're also having a talk about him being a clutch scorer and not drifting to the perimeter. And I just think the conversation would be a little bit different. So I think you're right. You're on the right path there in terms of him being the passport has something to do with the way that he's talked about.
Well, all the geopolitical stuff happening outside of hockey certainly has an effect in it as well. Scott Wheeler's with us. Scott, before we go, let's just move down to pick 18. The Winnipeg Jets will be on the clock. And you had an interesting piece in The Athletic with Corey on a question from Murat Atesh, our good friend, who essentially said, with some injury problems and smaller players like Ehlers and Lucius and Perfetti, do we think that the Jets might try and target a little bit more size and grit with the pick? Just thoughts on that, and what sort of a player might be available to Winnipeg when they're picking in the middle of the first round?
Yeah, I thought it was a good question from Murat, and one that I think is well made just because really of those guys that I talked about, even Heinola off the top, it is a little bit of a smaller group. Or at least in Brad's case, he doesn't lack the height, but he still needs to get stronger and certainly plays a game that exists on the perimeter and all of that. So that piece of it, I think, is a factor. I do think they likely tried to address a little bit of that with the Rutger McGroarty selection. Rutger's a really strong, well-built, stand out in the gym kind of guy. Like he'd walk into the dressing room tomorrow and be one of the stronger guys in the gym, I would expect. Even at the NHL level. So that piece of it helps. But specifically on the blue line within their pool, Sal Monson, we talked about Sal Monson. He's a bigger kid, but doesn't play particularly hard. And Heinola is on the smaller side for an NHL defenseman. So it does feel like if they go for a D at that selection, that they would maybe prioritize some size this time around and just look for maybe a bit of a different element. And even if they go forward, I think it's less likely that they go forward just because of the depth that they do have at forward within their pool. But even if they go forward, just somebody who could play with a Brad Lambert, somebody who could play with a Cole Perfetti and maybe sort of offset them, be a kind of a foil to those kinds of guys. And as far as options like that, there are multiple in and around 18. I think you could see a player like Quinton Musty of the Sudbury Wolves go in that range. Quinton is a big kid, was the first overall pick into the OHL, an American kid who elected not to go to the national program and to go to the OHL instead. Sort of 6'2", 200+ pound type of kid, but also has tons of skill, play makes, can shoot it, all of that. So he strikes me as a player who could really fit there. Callum Ritchie's another one. Callum, like Brad, has some work to do to fill out his frame, but Callum's 6'2", 6'3", was the second overall pick into the OHL behind Quinton Musty, and has been really productive on all things considered on an Oshawa Generals team that has not had hardly any talent around him in the last two seasons. So those are two guys that come to mind. Callum's a natural center, but has played a lot of right wing with Hockey Canada. Musty's a natural left wing who hasn't played much center at all. So different positions, but those two kids like that you're going to see those types of players available at 18. And I think the Jets would likely strongly consider each of those guys.
Scott, last one on the way out. And just very quickly, every year in the week or two heading into the draft, there's a guy that we maybe haven't talked about very much that is a late riser. We're about a month out or so. But any predictions on a player or two that maybe, hasn't been seeing himself as high on the mock drafts that is going to gain some traction and might be seeing or hearing his name picked a lot higher once we get to the end of June?
I think there are two names. One, and it's hard to call him a riser when he set and broke records by Austin Matthews and Jack Hughes at the national program. But Gabe Perreault of the national development team coming into this year was viewed as kind of a late first. He was a very skinny kid, kind of 5'11", but started at the program as 130 pounds. Now not 130 pounds. I think he's up around 170 now, but really still a very skinny kid, not a great skater. And as a result, there was this perception that no matter how productive he was, he kind of looked more like a mid to late first round guy. And then the stats just kept piling up and the records started breaking. And now I think there's a real chance that Gabe Perreault's a top 10 pick. So he has certainly made a really, really strong sort of case for himself as this season has progressed, that the talent is just undeniable. And that as a result, he belongs at the very top of the draft. One other kid who ironically actually didn't play much in the second half, but I think could surprise some people just in terms of the way that he hasn't been talked about as much as some of the other top prospects in the draft, is Samuel Honzik. He's a Slovakian kid, played for the Vancouver Giants in the WHL this year, actually broke his foot and missed the CHL Top Prospects game, so didn't get the limelight of the CHL Top Prospects game, missed a good chunk of the second half of the middle sort of third and then into the second half of the season with an injury, but is a player who scouts love. They're big on Samuel Honzik. He's 6'4". He can make plays, kind of has that Pavel Zacha feel to him, where Pavel Zacha wasn't the most talented player in his draft class, but was still a top 10 pick and is now a very important piece after starting in New Jersey, now a very important piece of the Boston Bruins, right? So I think there are teams that just look at a player like Honzik and think that guy's going to be a winning type of hockey player. That guy's going to be a top 9 winger in the NHL and be a really good player. And there's safety in that for some teams. Some teams don't love to take the swings on the sort of higher risk, higher reward guys. So I think you could see a Honzik who just hasn't been talked about in the top 10, top 15 conversation. I think there's a potential for him to be drafted there. And there's also a potential, I should say, in him being there at 18, though, as well. And if he is, again, another guy like Ritchie and like Musty that I think Winnipeg would strongly consider.
Scott, this has been just such a great chat. Cannot thank you enough. We'll look forward to all of your content along with Corey getting us ready for the draft in The Athletic, and got a couple cold ones for you in Nashville. We really appreciate you joining us.
Can't wait. It's going to be a ton of fun.
All right, great stuff with Scott Wheeler, and we'll have plenty more analysis and draft prep on the program heading into Nashville in the final week in June. Brandon Rewucki's teed up. He's going to join us right away. Moe Khan still to come a little later on. Hey, folks, if you're looking for great prices on natural and organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries, you got to get down to one of 7 Vita Health Fresh Market stores or online at myvita.ca with same-day local delivery if you get your order in at myvita.ca before 11 a.m., orders placed after 11 a.m. will be delivered the next day. Grilling season is here, gang. Get on down to Vita Health and stock up on some delicious Vita Market grass-fed bison and beef steaks. And the perfect thing to help you digest that red meat is Health First Primezyme digestive enzymes, available at Vita Health as well. 7 Winnipeg locations. Vita Health Fresh Market, empowering people to lead healthy lives. Pop by and see them today or shop online at myvita.ca. Our friends at Wallace & Wallace are Winnipeg's fencing and overhead door specialist, serving residential and commercial customers since 1946. If you need a fence, they've got pretty much every kind you could need. Vinyl, ornamental, welded wire, chain link, or wood. And if it's time to replace your garage door, Wallace & Wallace has Winnipeg's largest selection of overhead garage doors. Whether it's fencing or overhead doors, give them a call at 204-452-2700. Their team will arrange a time to come out and give you a free estimate. You can also visit them online at wallacefences.com or pop down to their showroom on Lawson Road off of Kenniston. The gang at F Apparel is ready for wedding season. Are you, fellas? Hey, if you need to up your menswear game heading into spring and summer, get on down to F Apparel. Custom suits beginning at $400, along with chinos, golf pants, custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, and an incredible selection of menswear accessories. 15% discount for wedding parties, a free custom shirt and tie for 2023 high school grads with the purchase of a new suit. Pop on down to see him at 190 Smith Street or make an appointment or find out more online at EPHapparel.com. And we're pushing 30 degrees all weekend. No better place to add to your to-do list than to get the family down to one of the 4 Nick and Nicky DQs and try all the great new summer blizzard flavors. It's not summer until you've had a blizzard at Nick and Nicky DQ. 4 locations: DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, DQ St. Anne's, and DQ Niverville. Hit them up online at DQ Manitoba for custom-made DQ ice cream or blizzard cakes for your next party event as well. And, of course, couple more days till we're back at the track, but Assiniboia Downs live racing resumes on Monday and Tuesday of next week, and then the normal schedule of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But food truck wars are happening this weekend at the track, so maybe you plan that as part of your weekend to-do list. Get down to Assiniboia Downs and enjoy the beer gardens presented by Little Brown Jug and all the great food at Food Truck Wars at Assiniboia Downs this weekend. Speaking of food, a nice little segue into bringing in the hosts of Skates and Plates himself, Brandon Rewucki, back to WST. Rew, what's going on? How are you?
I'm doing all right, man. I know what my weekend plans are now, so thanks for helping me out with that. That's a beauty right there.
There's some great food trucks in the city of Winnipeg, and it's just a matter of finding out where they're at. What a great idea to get them all together for an event out at the Downs. That is something we should go and check out. Right up the alley of Skates and Plates.
One of my buddies actually had his wedding catered by a food truck here in Winnipeg. It was the Red Ember food truck. That like massive, the big boy that they have there. It was probably the best wedding food I've ever had, to be honest with you. So I'm excited. It sounds good. Yeah, there's some real talent out there. There's also a great I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but like some kind of island fusion one. Island fusion. That's what it was. Yeah. They bring the flavor in a big way.
You know, it's funny. The guy that does the Island Fusion. A friend of mine knows him, and we do just Jamaican patty orders by the dozen at some point during the year. And we'll all go watch a hockey game, and then he'll roll into the bar with 5 pizza boxes, a dozen in each, and go to town. It's some good stuff. Well, maybe next week we can get some good food truck rankings from you on the program. Right now, though, listen, we got to get to the Florida Panthers. They're moving on to the Stanley Cup final, completing the sweep of the Carolina Hurricanes yesterday. How should Winnipeg Jet fans feel right now watching Paul Maurice get what he's getting out of this team that just snuck into the playoffs with a worse record than Winnipeg did and is now 4 wins away from winning the Stanley Cup?
Well, the good news is that whatever narrative you want to gain from it, you can go with it. Because
true.
There's honestly, I've seen so many people with so many different takes and all in different directions too. And none of them are really wrong, which is kind of the funny part. Like you have the pro Mauricers taking a victory lap around everybody right now. You have, maybe people that were in the anti-Maurice camp say, well, when your goalie gets a 980 over the course of a conference fight, you're probably going to win that series more often than not. I mean, you can go all over the place, but I think, I don't know, you can feel however you want. I like Paul Maurice. I would say this doesn't make him an elite coach in the NHL, but he's a nice dude. And I had the chances I've had to talk with him, I've, come away kind of rooting for him. So I'm not going to be upset or anything like that if the Panthers go on and win the Stanley Cup, or even if they don't. But at the same time, it's just interesting how I guess more so the danger of trying to narrow down a complete statement, like affirm this is the reason why the Panthers are where they are right now. Because the reality of the situation is, if if a dysfunctional Penguins team finds a way to beat two of the worst hockey teams in the NHL this year, the narrative completely does a 180 on Paul Maurice, on Sergei Bobrovsky, on Matthew Tkachuk, on down and down and down the list. I mean, Zito as well, the GM there, right? Like, I mean, they were so close to not even being in the dance to get in there. And then we have, the Game 5 comeback. We have the Game 7 Bruins meltdown. And there's so many, right? Like, so I'm not going to make some big sweeping declaration one way or the other, because let's face it, hockey is the most random sport out there, and a bounce or two here or there, and we do complete 180s on coaches and players' legacies and different things like that. But he's doing a good job out there. I mean, let's face it. You take down the top 3 teams in the East, you're obviously doing something right. But I would, probably if we're looking to allocate some praise and a bigger reason as to why the Panthers are where they are right now. I mean, number one is your goaltender is putting forth a legendary performance. And when goalies put forth legendary performances through 3 consecutive series, this is generally what happens. And then you have a superstar in Matt Tkachuk just being, I mean, you're talking about a guy that was labeled a playoff unperformer coming into this season. Even more than Paul Maurice. I don't know if there's anybody that's done a 180 or bolstered their reputation more than Matthew Tkachuk, who just scores the biggest goals at the biggest possible times.
Well, and Calgary fans must be sick to their stomach. I mean, if you think back to the Battle of Alberta last year, what was it, 9-6 in the first game? And then it was all Edmonton. And Tkachuk wasn't much of a factor in the rest of that series. And he couldn't look any different right now, really putting this team on his back along with Bob and dragging them to the Cup final. And yes, that game where Pittsburgh lost at home to Chicago, I was just looking at the goal that won it for the Blackhawks. Do you know who scored it? Buddy Robinson.
Oh,
Buddy Robinson back in the NHL. Back in the NHL. And then, I mean, I was talking about this at the start of the show, but you think that, so Florida gets in. Florida beats Boston. Florida then knocks the Leafs out, which puts that entire team into turmoil. Dubas is out, and Dubas may end up managing the Pittsburgh Penguins, who would have been in if they could have just beaten the Blackhawks in that game. I mean, you talk about a lot of randomness. It is almost like a magic carpet ride, but we see this happen over and over with different teams. Maybe not always from the 8th hole like the Panthers have done, but they are doing that. And I'll say this about Maurice. I think what's happening right now with the Panthers, and part of it is the players that they have on the club, but this team is buying into his message. I saw a great thing, and I talked about it a little earlier. Mike Kelly broke it down about how often and how few times that the Panthers would dump the puck in last year, and how often they wouldn't even dump the puck out for safety in their own ends. Both of those numbers have gone way up this year under Paul Maurice, but a big part of it is that come playoff time, you have to do that. And they did that more through the regular season, more prepared to do it. And the bottom line is when they are dumping it in, they are winning puck battles. And so much of it, Brandon, I mean, you can break it down, but it's one-on-one a lot of times. Who's winning that puck? Who's keeping the puck? And the Florida Panthers are doing a hell of a good job of it. And when they have it, they're making the most of their chances, far better than their opponents who have to get through Bob.
Yeah, I mean, it really speaks to how fickle coaching can be at the NHL level, because I know that the Maurice tenure didn't end super well here in Winnipeg, but were the 2018 Winnipeg Jets not looking a whole lot like these Panthers right now?
Oh, yeah.
Like, the Jets were, which is just, it's wild to think about, but a large group of this team right now in Winnipeg bought into Paul Maurice, and they weren't able to have a ton of success, and they were an absolute force to be reckoned with. But the message, or I don't know if the message got stale or it just wasn't being received, whatever the reason was, but you kind of see things, turn into a bit of a tailspin in the last couple of seasons there. And then obviously the change with Maurice going over to Florida. So, I mean, he's proven that he can do a good job if he's able to get a group to buy into the message. The intriguing part with Maurice looking back at his tenure is that, when people would always say the win-loss thing, was that he never got goaltending. And wouldn't you know it, that he didn't get goaltending in the first half of his coaching career, maybe the first 2/3, but then he ends up with Connor Hellebuck and then an all-time Hall of Fame performance from Sergei Bobrovsky here right now, so he's getting it in spades. And that's the other funny part of this too, Huss, is that, you could point to it, like I said there, and say, hey, Florida was insanely lucky to have Pittsburgh blow it in the final 2 games of the season. But then you can flip right around and say, well, the Panthers were one of the best analytical teams throughout the entire regular season. They were unlucky not to be in a more fortunate spot. So you can go all over the place here. And again, like I said earlier, whatever narrative you believe in, you probably have some facts and some data to back it up, which is just hilarious and makes for great sports talk.
Very malleable topics right now.
Yeah, but it also, I mean, if you're looking almost from more of a macro perspective, the Panthers, even with all the departures they had the previous offseason, and again, kind of shows the importance of having elite high-end talent at important positions, where you have your number one center in Barkov. You have, Tkachuk's a unicorn, basically, as impactful as a number one center out there on the wing. And then they've got 2 number one defensemen as well out there in Florida. So, that's, to me, when I look at why the Panthers are where they are, a bunch of different factors. But let's face it, too, this isn't your normal 8 seed that snuck in on the last day of the postseason. This was, I don't know what the opposite of a paper tiger is, but that's what the Florida Panthers were once they were able to get into the dance here, and they're doing the 2012 Kings dance right now.
Well, and it's funny. I'll give Jack Hand credit, that former assistant coach with the Leafs that does a lot of interesting stuff online. He said before it, this is a bad matchup for the Boston Bruins. This is going to be a real test. Now, that being said, if Brad Marchand scores in the final 2 seconds of Game 5 on that clear-cut breakaway up 3-1, the Bruins move on, and history is entirely different. But he didn't, and from that moment on, they have caught lightning in a bottle. Tkachuk, back-to-back 40-goal seasons. His numbers this year, 79 games, 40 goals, 69 assists for 109 points, and 123 penalty minutes, which you don't often see triple digits right now in the NHL. I had this conversation last night watching the game with some of my buddies, and our pal Greg from Royal dropped this one on me, and I've been thinking about it since last night, and I'm interested in what you think. If you had a redraft of the entire National Hockey League right now, Connor McDavid's obviously number 1. I don't think there's much dispute with that. Who's number 2? And how close is Matthew Tkachuk to being that guy? Think about 40 goals, 109 points, all the intangibles that he brings, and then everything else about the culture carrier. Like, who else is in the mix for that? We thought maybe like Cale Makar for sure. Yeah. Obviously, Nate McKinnon would be in the mix. But, Matthew Tkachuk, I would have never thought of him as that sort of franchise player before, but it's pretty hard not to. He's already had the numbers, and now, when it matters the most, he's elevating his game and doing things that, frankly, no one else, including Connor McDavid, wasn't able to do in their last round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I think he's vaulted himself into the best player in the world not named Connor McDavid discussion because McDavid's on a planet all on his own, but you want to talk, I would say Makar, Draisaitl, McKinnon, Matthews, and Tkachuk. Like, those are, like, he's there. I don't know what I guess
there's
the order
a lot
at
of
that
GMs.
point.
I guarantee there's probably at least a handful of GMs that probably would actually have Tkachuk over a bunch of those guys that you just mentioned.
Yeah. Like, you could make a case for any of the, I would probably have Makar too, because he's just a complete freak. But man, it would be tough. Yeah, you could. That's I guess kind of the crazy thing is you can make a case for him being the second best player on the planet right now. I don't know if he is or not, but he's turned into an absolute manimal. Like, he's just he influences the game every single time he steps out on the ice, and he's one of the rare ones that for all of Draisaitl's insane offensive exploits, he gives a fair bit back of the defensive end. Obviously still enough to be one of the 3 or 4 best players on the planet, but Tkachuk does it everywhere. Like, there's no hole in his game. He's not a great skater, but he's good enough to get the job done. But if you look at what he does out there, he is the new complete package. So and it's just funny to think about how quickly legacies and stuff like that get turned around. Hey, Huss, where prior to this in Calgary, it was, can you get it done in the playoffs with Matthew Tkachuk? It was very, very similar to Pavel Datsyuk too in Detroit. I would always make this argument when people would say Ehlers can't do this, he can't do that in the playoffs. Datsuk's, I think, first 19 playoff games, he had 5 points. and then ends up being what I would say is a Hall of Fame player, right? Like, so it also kind of lends to the notion that maybe don't make an assertion on somebody's legacy before they get into the back half of their career at the very least.
Well, I'm glad you brought Ehlers and the Jets into it, because I did want to ask you. I mean, now that we've seen another couple rounds of the playoffs and seeing what Vegas has done to Edmonton and are doing to Dallas, and where the Panthers are right now, when you look at the Winnipeg Jets and what they are, what we've seen them be in the past, and obviously where players are at right now, but I mean, first of all, you need to have a team that shows up and fights the way a team like Carolina did last night with their backs against the wall. And that obviously is a big concern. And a lot of people, myself included, still sort of bent at the, just how meekly they kind of went out in Game 5. And that's not the first time this happened. And that maybe is more an identity thing. But as far as a team being built, there's a lot of skill. There's a lot of scoring on the Winnipeg Jets, and they've had that for a while. There's a lot of things that they don't have. When you see these teams that are still battling, and let's assume that it's Vegas and Florida, what can we learn about those teams as to where the Winnipeg Jets need to tweak their roster, improve certain styles or qualities coming in if they want to be more competitive with the teams that are really legit cup contenders once we get to this point in the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much time you want to spend on this, but the number one is the thing that's the hardest to kind of, I guess, put a number on, and that's just the identity and the culture of the team. Like that's it. That's number one. They have the skill on the team. It's just there's something wrong with the mix that it doesn't work when the chips are down. And I think Carolina is a great example of that. I mean, they literally, because of their head coach and the way that they play, believe that they were still in this down 3-0. and they were, I mean, that is the tightest sweep you will ever see, I think, maybe in any sport, where Carolina, in an alternate universe, might have found a way to sweep that series as well if a couple of bounces go their way. And I think what you see in Vegas too, where they take a malcontent, a guy that was almost a bit of a pariah in Jack Eichel, and he's doing the Matthew Tkachuk run out there in the Western Conference, where he's been the best player out there in the West all playoffs long after Game 1 against Winnipeg at the very least. So I mean that's got to be the first issue that's figured out. Then if you want to talk more so player personnel, and it's going to depend a lot too on the trade returns that the Jets get if they do ship out a number of their guys. But I guess the one thing that I've noticed, and I've said for a while now, that I think Winnipeg's really missing is the need to have a stud on the second pair. You can have it's mandatory to have that number one guy, that number one blue liner, and thankfully the Jets were able to find that in Josh Morrissey. But you really do. You look at these teams, you need to have that second piece behind him. Whether it's on the same pairing or on the one behind him, that you can trust and lean on and know that, hey, through 40, 45, maybe even 50 minutes of a hockey game, we're going to have a guy that can carry the pace of play on the back end for us. I think that's one of the big pieces of the Jets have been missing really since Byfuglien left. Because when Byfuglien was there, they had enough behind him. Like they would have, Trouba and Morrissey as a pairing were able to, I think, elevate their level of play to something like that as a grouping, because Dustin Byfuglien was the big horse up front for them. And I think that's one of the main things this club is missing right now, is that they don't have somebody that can maybe not equal what Morrissey does on the back end, because he's very unique in terms of how he delivers value to the team, but to have a guy that you feel super, super comfortable with playing 25 minutes behind him. All those teams that are left have a guy like that, and it's pretty noticeable when you see Vegas and their duo with Pietrangelo and Theodore, and then even, both Florida and Carolina, but Florida having Montour and Ekblad. I think that is one of the pieces that the Jets, just taking a look at their current roster as it's constructed right now, they could find somebody like that to come in and step up for them. It would be a massive, massive step in the right direction.
Brandon Rewucki's with us. Speaking of the blue line, and one of the big topics that we've had outside of the obvious, what's happening with Helly, Scheifele, Dubois, Wheeler, is the blue line and the need to either figure out a way to get Ville Heinola and Declan Chisholm onto the roster and potentially playing in games to see what they've got, or moving them or moving someone. As I said, you can only have so many guys, and you don't want to have a Johnny Kovacevic situation where you're losing a talented young guy that hasn't really, certainly in Chisholm's spot, that hasn't really got a chance to show what he can do at the NHL level. lose him before getting a chance to do that. But in addition to that, Dylan Samberg needs a new contract. And I was talking about this with Mike at the end of the year. What do you think a contract for Dylan Samberg looks like? And if you're the Winnipeg Jets, I sort of brought up that I can't help but look at Zach Whitecloud with a 6-year deal at $2.7 million. Like, I think, have we learned enough about Dylan Samberg that he can be definitely a third, second pairing guy for a long term? And does it make sense for the Jets to make an aggressive offer to pay him more now and get him signed long term?
That's exactly where I was going with that. The Jets should do everything in their power to make it a 5-6 year deal. And if I'm Dylan Samberg, I'm doing everything in my power to make it a 1, maybe a 2-year deal at most, because he's going to be getting the playing time coming up here. So, I mean, it's going to be the give and take there, right? I mean, I 100%. Let's try to go long term here. Lock him up. I mean, not on a crazy number, and I don't think it's going to be as low as Whitecloud's was. So does 3.5 get it done on a 5-6 year deal for Dylan? Like, I don't know. It's a lot of security for a guy that, you know, hasn't really got a ton of playing time at the NHL level.
And I'm not sure he ever has the points that are going to be. I mean, let's face it,
Exactly.
points are a huge part. Like, whether they matter when that's what you're looking for in a defenseman. I think a horse like Samberg probably has more of an upside when it comes to, you know, offense if he's in more of those situations and plays more. But I'm not sure he'll ever be a guy that, you know, is able to, you know, command $5 or $6 million a year because, you know, he's putting up 18 to 20 goals and 55 points. That being said, and that's part of the reason why, if that's not going to be the case, a fair deal that compensates him maybe better in the short term, but gives the Jets some long-term security is something that I think really could be a win-win for both sides. But to me, having that sort of security of knowing a player like that is going to be with you for 5 to 6 years, because as much as there's a logjam right now, at the end of next season, Dylan and DeMello are off the books, and then the following season, it's basically only Josh Morrissey that's here for a long time.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, even if the same group of D-men are back, I don't know. He's my second pair left shot defenseman right now. Like, even if Brendan Dillon comes back and everybody's there, I mean, he's proven, and I mean, he's having himself a pretty damn good World Championships too right now, which is awesome for him. But yeah, I mean, there's only two ways defensemen get paid in the NHL these days. It's either points or time on ice. I mean, we've seen. I guess Ben Sherratt would be the most recent example of somebody that got a decently sized contract on a per year basis, but doesn't really contribute much to anything offensively. So, I mean, those guys do get paid, but you have to be playing 23, 24 minutes a night. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, exactly. So I think a fair compromise is 5-6 years in and around $3.5 million. Like, I think that could work for both sides. And yeah, man, I mean, if you're paying your second pair defenseman, which I think is I don't want to say is floor necessarily, but what you expect out of them, that's a great deal if you're the Winnipeg Jets in that situation. And you get some cost certainty there, and it kind of shows as well to your young guys, your prospects, that, you know, maybe the ice time isn't always there for you right out of the gate, but if you come up, you show well, you're going to get paid and rewarded pretty handsomely there. So I would hope the Jets can get something done long term, but depends how much, I guess, Dylan Samberg believes in his offensive game, if maybe he thinks I can cash in a much bigger clip in a year or two time.
Yeah, I know. It's a good point. Hey, 10 seconds. We bringing the brooms out tonight, or is this series going back to Vegas?
I think we're pretty damn close to broom time. Broom time for the Stars and broom time for the pretzels out there on the ice. Let's try to keep it clean tonight, Dallas. Come on now.
Yeah, the bad vibes from everything in Dallas. I think this series is over. We'll see what happens. Rewucki, have an awesome weekend. Hit those food trucks and come back with a report for both Skates and Plates and WST visit next week.
I'll get to work. Have a good weekend, man.
Good stuff. There is our pal, Brandon Rewucki. All right, really looking forward to getting WST fan favorite Moe Khan back on the show in just a second. We're going to get ready for CEBL season. But Bomber season is just around the corner. First preseason game is next week, and you know where to be before the game. The Princess Auto Tailgate Zone outside IG Field, presented by proud sponsors of the Bombers. Princess Auto, which is also the place where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. Pop by and see them, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West locations, or shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. Consolidated Supply, leaders in irrigation systems, artificial turf, and new and used golf carts, is the exclusive club car dealer in Manitoba, is ready for spring and summer. We've also got other great options for your property, including making it look as great on the lawn, hot tubs, and how about some amazing outdoor kitchen options as well. Not to mention, they are your leader in small engine parts and repair. Consolidated Supply is there for you and all your needs as we get into the new season. See them at their showroom, open to the public at 1395 Niagara Road East, or find out more online at cte.ca. You know what? Seabears jerseys just dropped yesterday, and I know very soon we can add the Seabears to the lineup of Winnipeg teams that you can get outfitted at Royal Sports, Manitoba's #1 sports superstore. Biggest and best selection of licensed team gear featuring the Jets, Bombers, NHL, NFL, and tons of new Jays and Major League Baseball gear just in time for the start of the season. And of course, hopefully some hoop stuff with our new team in the CEBL. Spring stocks arriving daily, soccer, baseball, softball, tennis, tons of disc golf equipment as well if you want to get out and bang some chains. And of course, a huge selection of bikes. Get down and see them, 750 Pembina Highway, and make sure to follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops, sale information, of course, a heads up on their massive tent sales coming up a little later on. And just before we bring in Moe, looking for a spot to watch this game tonight? No better place to get together with friends for the big game than your local BP. Enjoy ice-cold schooners, world-famous BP wings, gourmet pizzas, and the latest from the Boston Pizza Fanalytics menu. And if you're staying in, you can always order online at bostonpizza.com. All right, let's head out to Montreal. It's been too long. A fan favorite and a true fashion plate of Canadian media. He comes to us today as the voice of the Alliance de Montréal in the CEBL. You know him as Moe Khan. Moe, what's up, man? It's great to have you back on the show.
All as well, Andrew. Actually, in French, is the Alliance de Montréal.
Alliance, excuse me. I appreciate that. There's a lot of French folks around here. We have a big community. I want to get it right. So, Alliance de Montréal. Did I do well there?
That's correct.
We're fired up about this new season and this new team. Hard to believe. I think for a lot of people, they maybe have heard of the CEBL, but this is beginning the 5th season of this league. You've been involved for years right now. I mean, give us a perspective on how this league has grown, and from Montreal, how exciting it is to see where the league is, adding teams like the Winnipeg Seabears to the circuit this year.
Well, I mean, start off with Winnipeg. They're now the gateway to Western Canada for those teams in the CEBL. I think Mike Morelli went at it to say, look, let's address Winnipeg, Calgary in particular, because those are two holes in Western Canada that was lacking representation. And, you move Fraser Valley to Vancouver, who you guys will play this weekend. And now you have the CEBL established in the major cities across Canada, whether it's from Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, points in between, Sask included, and Calgary, Edmonton, and Winnipeg. It's massive. And, for the 2 years that I've been involved with the CEBL, I mean, here in Montreal, it has been huge for the league because Montreal, I think, is the only team right now that has 1,000 season ticket holders as we speak going into the year, which is a huge number for the league. The Arena in Montreal seats about 3,500. They sold out tomorrow night's game against Niagara that they'll have at home. They'll play Ottawa on the weekend. But for Mike Morelli to also get the TSN deal as a partnership as well is massive for the league's profile to kind of expand the growth and provide basketball viewing for Canadian viewers in Canada in the summer months of May, June, and July, and hopefully August if your team gets to the Final Four in Vancouver.
Yeah, well, and I was just checking out the league website, and I knew that there were going to be a game of the week on TSN, which would be great exposure for the league. What I didn't know is that every single game is going to be available on TSN Plus, and as they're trying to gain new fans, expose this in new markets like here in Winnipeg, but also grow the ability to follow this league. That is a huge coup, and it speaks to the work that Mike's been doing to grow this kind of organically, grassroots, and now dealing with one of the biggest players when it comes to sports media to get it out to other Canadians.
Oh, no question. I mean, TSN, Sportsnet are the two big hitters of Canada. We know that, Andrew. We worked in the media business for many years. And to get TSN to be a partner in this whole process is massive because, as you said before, they'll have one national TV game per week. You can get all the games on the TSN Plus platform or the CEBL Plus platform itself. So you have avenues to watch the games and even listen for those who have local radio rights as well. So I just think now for the league to grow, you want to make sure these 10 teams are locked in. I think Halifax down the road could be a franchise to look at because you think about it now, Andrew, right? When you look at the U Sports Final 8, it's always held in Halifax from 9 times out of 10. And that's a massive basketball city when you look at what they produce from a talent level and from a passion level. So I think for Mike Morreale, I think he wants to make sure this is going to be established for all 10 cities and perhaps expand to team number 11 and 12 down the road to really make it a true coast-to-coast league.
Mo, I mean, before we get into kind of the teams and whatnot, I mean, people that have not seen the CEBL before, which will many of them probably be going to their first game on Saturday when the Sea Bears get going. I mean, how would you describe the players, the quality of play, and maybe the style of the league?
So for those who are going to go watch the Sea Bears in your market for the first time, you're going to have really good quality basketball across the board. You have guys who play in the NBA G League, high-level European basketball, U Sports, NCAA. And the thing is, the rule is that you have to have 3 Canadians on the court at all times, like a CFL ratio, right? Like three Canadians on the court at all times here. You have 3 internationals or 2 Americans, whatever ratio you want to go with from your international cover and stuff. And the thing is, what's cool about this league is that they have a target score at the end of each game. So for those who watched the Brampton-Ottawa game on Wednesday night, which was a thriller, there's a target score at the end of the fourth quarter. So once you get to the final 4 minutes of a basketball game in the fourth quarter, the clock goes off and there's a target score. So for example, Winnipeg's playing Vancouver. Let's say Winnipeg is up 60-50 with 4 minutes to go. Well, now the target score is 69 points to win the ball game. And as we saw with Brampton and Ottawa yesterday, Ottawa was down, I think, 10 points in the target score window, and they came back to win by 1 point. So that gives teams who are trailing a chance to win the ball game. And Mike Morreale made the point that, look, we don't want to go to a fourth quarter of a traditional ball game where you know it's over and done with 2 minutes to go. We want to keep this exciting for fans to watch from the start to the finish here. So for those who will go, the unique change will be the target score that you'll see in the final 4 minutes of every ball game that you watch, with the Sea Bears included.
That is wild, and I had no idea about that. So how does it work? Do they just do an announcement? This is the target score, and that says right up on the thing, and now you know this is what we're playing for. You got to get to this threshold, and I mean, if it's Brick City for a while, it could take another 10 or 15 minutes, but the game's not over until someone gets to that number.
Actually, once you get inside 4 minutes, the first whistle inside 4 minutes, to make sure I clarify that. So the first whistle inside 4 minutes, clock is off. The PA guy will announce, he or she will announce, the target score will be this. Whoever is leading or tie game, they'll add 9 points to that total of that leading score and say that is the target score for both teams to reach to win that ball game. And, check it out. I encourage your viewers and listeners and the whole nine to go to the CEBL website and check out the highlights. They have it on Twitter as well for a highlight package to understand what it is. It brings a different element of strategy for coaches and for players to say that we might be down 20. There's still a chance to win that ball game because the clock is off and we can make a run here as it was with Ottawa, making the run against Brampton yesterday in Ottawa.
So we'll find out about the Sea Bears in game number 1 and how Mike Taylor puts together his club. There's some great local content, and Chad Posthumous, the first player with some experience as a champion in this league for other clubs, and he's played around the world. Some great talent from both U of W and the U of M being part of it. But as far as the league goes, Mo, who are the big boys? Who's the team to beat right now going into the season? Or do we even know? I mean, do the rosters change so much from year to year that the defending champion is might be far behind other teams when we tip off this week?
That's the unique challenge of this league, is that the roster construction changes every year because you don't keep the same core. You'll have 3-4 guys that will come back and form a core for the team that carries over. But every year you have to be very meticulous in how you build up your team. So, for example, the team that's been the prohibitive favorite to win is Niagara, who are playing Montreal tomorrow night. They got 5 returning players from their team last year. They added guys from other teams in the league to make it a very deep roster. It will be fascinating to see how they do on the road in Montreal. And, for those who will come to Montreal that have played here last year, even though Montreal was 4-16 last season in Verdun, which is the home base for their arena, it was the loudest arena in the league, and they had difficulty playing in this arena. So it'll be unique to see how Niagara fares in the home opener tomorrow for the Lions. I think for Winnipeg, look, you mentioned Chad Posthumous. He's a big man. He's well regarded in the league across Canada for what he's done for the sport of basketball in Winnipeg. The name to watch out for is Michael Okafor. He played for what was then the Hamilton Honey Badgers, now at Brampton. He's a high flyer. He's a guy that will dunk it on anybody. He's confident. He's got that bravado in him that will rub off on his teammates in a positive way. So that's the guy I'm watching out for Winnipeg. If he does play with the full roster, Michael Okafor, and what he can bring to the court. And he's definitely a fly wire out there that will make your team exciting and for fans to really gravitate towards the Sea Bears going towards game one.
Who is Drake involved with the Honey Badgers? Is that right?
Scarborough Shooting Stars. So Drake's affiliation with Scarborough is that he has people who work with the Scarborough team. Of course, J. Cole, the hip-hop artist, was with Scarborough last year, and Drake kind of got into that with J. Cole being buddy and all that. And Drake, if you've seen his videos and whenever he's on Instagram or social media, he does wear Scarborough gear, right? And that's massive because it's exposure for the league.
Oh, yeah.
And it's massive, Andrew, because, look, all it takes is one person to wear Sea Bear gear, and everyone's going to ask, what is that logo? Where can I find it? I want to get whatever he or she's wearing. So it's all about branding for the league. And they do it properly, which they've done so up till now. I think this league can definitely grow, and I think it has a great chance to be an establishment for all Canadian basketball players to use as maybe a diving board to go towards the NBA G League, high-level Europe, or maybe get an NBA contract down the road.
I'm just looking through the schedule here to find out when our grudge match is between the Sea Bears and l'Alliance de Montréal. I do see that the Sea Bears are in Montreal on the 3rd of July.
Right.
How does the schedule work? Are you guys coming here at all, or
no? So the way it works with the broadcast, when you watch the games, it will be the home team broadcast. So whenever you watch a Montreal Lions home game, you will have my ugly face along with Dwight Walton and Gabby Bear on your screens watching. That's
a hell of a broadcast team. And just quickly, I mean, obviously we know Dwight as well.
Yeah.
Remo and I, before the game went on, we're going through the broadcast teams throughout the league, and a lot of familiar faces. Rod Black's doing the games. I showed it to Christian O'Mell, who's going to be calling the games here in Winnipeg, along with Dave Crook. I mean, great to see that sort of quality broadcast, tied in with the league, especially considering every game is available on TSN Plus.
It's massive when a guy of his ilk and Rod Black is involved. And I know Rod, you know Rod very well, and he's a great guy overall, and he loves basketball. And for him to be part of this whole process the last couple of years is huge for the league. And they're bringing Chuck Swirsky as well, for now the Bulls radio announcer who used to call Raptor games many, many years ago. So, the league's taking those steps here to really kind of bring in established names to kind of grow the brand. And, for those who will watch games, whether Winnipeg plays in Montreal or Brampton, you will have the home team broadcast. But I will be straight down the road here when we had the Nordic clash of the Sea Bears and the Alliance going at it on July 3rd in Montreal, my friend.
Well, I'm just noticing that then Alliance comes here to the Peg on Friday, July 14th. So a little home and home action. I mean, this is great. And, you've seen it working, within the league for the last couple of years of just the momentum of basketball in Canada. And I think we can trace it back to the Raptors, first of all, being established and, continuing to grow. Obviously, the 2019 championship was a signature moment, I think, in basketball in our country. But as the demographics of Canada have changed as well, basketball has really grown. And it really does seem like we're just on the precipice of an incredibly bright future for this league and the team here in Winnipeg.
Yeah, look, I'll give you an example. Tom McCullough, who you know very well, Winnipeg guy. When we saw him play for the Sixers.
Pinball wizard.
Yeah, like when he played for Philly in New Jersey, it was super cool. Like that's pretty cool. You have Tom McCullough getting passes from Allen Iverson whenever he would pass the ball, which was never. But, that's the growth of where the league was 20, 30 years ago to where we are today, where now it's almost a rite of passage that we have one or two Canadians get drafted in the first round of the NBA draft every year. And, there will be a couple of guys who will be coming up in the next couple of years for what they build up here. So this thing now for the CEBL, for what they want to do, as long as it becomes a diving board for these young athletes to look at this as being an option during the summer months to keep themselves in shape, and also more game film to catch on with a bigger pro league during the fall, winter, spring months. It's a great way, and we've seen guys in this league get G League contract tryouts and even into the NBA as well, Andrew. So this is definitely an opportunity for guys, American, international, or Canadian, to have a chance to realize their NBA dreams.
It really is an interesting schedule, too. I mean, we're getting going this weekend, and I mean, the regular season's done at the end of July. So, I mean, huge opportunity for the U Sports players that are involved in this league. And to your point, a great spot for players that have been playing elsewhere to come in, stay fresh, maybe get other looks to help them continue their pro career, still with the opportunity of coming back to the CEBL in the off seasons for these other leagues.
Yeah, like, and you made a great point, right? It's a race. 20-game schedule in a race where you have to get off to a good start. And, for Winnipeg, their schedule isn't easy. I know they got Vancouver coming up, and they come out to the East Coast where they play Brampton, I think, in Scarborough as well. So they have to really come off to a good start. If they can come out of the month of the first 4 weeks, 4-1, 3-2, I think they're in good shape. Any team that has 3-4 wins by the 5-game mark of the season is in good shape. And it's all about runs right now, Andrew. If you can put together 4, 5, 6 wins in a row, it sets up for you to get a playoff spot as well. And I think that's key in this league, because if you lose 3, 4 in a row, you're in serious trouble, and that could end your season before you get to July. So it's all about getting those wins early, obtain that credit, that insurance policy early. And if you do that good enough here, you'll be okay going towards the end of July and hopefully playoff basketball in August.
Moe Khan is with us, the voice of l'Alliance de Montréal. Geez, I'm getting better at that the more I have you on, Mo. So let's see. There's 10 teams in the league right now with the Sea Bears coming in this year. Is there divisions, and how does the playoff format work?
Right. So up until this year, they had one division. So it was whatever it was. Mm-hmm. This year we have 2 divisions because you want to create that geography rivalry. So, for example, in the East, you have Montreal, Ottawa, Scarborough, Brampton, Niagara. The West, you have Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, Sask, and Winnipeg. And what it is that, and this might get complicated here, right? So Vancouver's hosting the Final Four. Vancouver gets an automatic berth into that event because they're the host team. And that's been one of those things where, guys like, well, is that right? Is that wrong? So that's why Vancouver's probably going to load up to have a team that can compete for a championship this year and make a run for it. And the way it works is sort of like, you have your teams qualify for the playoffs, but then there's that chance to kind of become like Mortal Kombat, where if you're the 4th seed in your division, you can make it into the playoffs in the Final Four by going through the back roads or the back routes to get to that point. So the playoff format's a little bit confusing at first, but if you see it on their website, it's clearly explained. I get confused sometimes with the playoff format, but it's fairly explainable on how it should be and how it will be for teams that want to get into Vancouver. And of course, they always have the championship weekend at a host city, and this year Vancouver will have that honor to do so in Langley.
Mo, before we go, and thanks a lot for the hoops talk. Listen, people are really excited to see what
I'm happy, man.
this
The
league is
logo
about.
looks super cool. The uniform looks super cool, by the way.
Yeah, you know what? They think a little bit of taste of the old Winnipeg Thunder days with the colors, and I'll tell you what, Winnipeg in their first game is going to set a new CEBL record for attendance at a game. Right. They've already opened up more seats than they originally planned, and I think that original plan was already a record-breaking crowd. So if it's anything like the way
capacity, Andrew, because I know they sold out, but I know they opened up seats. But what we're looking at for capacity?
Listen, it's a Canada Life Center, so realistically, they could keep on selling tickets up into the upper bowl. Like, I have a feeling the initial plan was probably in the 4,000 to 5,000 range.
That's amazing.
But that's done, and they're open. So, if they sold out the entire lower bowl of the arena, and I'm not sure what sort of floor seating that there would be, I think we'll be talking about in the neighborhood of 7,000 to 8,000 seats. And
amazing.
If that's the case, that would be phenomenal. Listen, I think it'll be a bit of a novelty at the start, but I will say this, and you see it firsthand, especially in Montreal. But while we've always been a hockey country, and we just assume all Canadians are into hockey. With the growth of soccer and basketball and some of these sports that haven't been as big in Canada in the past, that is where the growth is right now in the sports landscape of Canada. And, we saw it with the Canadian Soccer League as we continue to try to build that. This, I think, is even more perfectly situated to really lay the flag in, if you will, for Canadian hoops. And I think the schedule, the way it works, the timing of the league is very, very well placed. And as I said, you've seen the growth over the last couple of years, and I think we're just getting started with teams like here in Winnipeg, which I'm very confident is going to be a real success this year.
No question. Key is, Andrew, one thing that the Alliance did so well is to avoid going head-to-head with the Alouettes or CFMTL for soccer. if the Seabears can avoid going head-to-head with the Bombers for home games, it makes it easier for Winnipeg sports fans to say, look, I can go to a Bomber game on a Thursday, go to a Seabear game on a Saturday, and enjoy both. And that's the key, and that's where Mike Morreale comes into play, being a former CFL player, where he can kind of, guide teams. Say, listen, guys, let's avoid those CFL dates with your teams in that moment here, so we can get the best crowds. And I'm super happy for Winnipeg that they get to experience this. 5,000 plus would be massive. And, that just grows a brand, and that inspires more kids in your area, Andrew, to say, look, I want to play basketball. And maybe one day down the road, Seabears or play even higher level of competition down the road.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed on that one. And as I say, David Asper, longtime, Bomber board member, the owner of the club, I'm pretty darn sure that he would have made sure that the schedule didn't overlap, just because, he's going to be at the Bomber games as well as, of course, what's happening with the Hoops team downtown. Hey, Mo, before we go, cannot have you on the program with getting a little bit of off-season update from what you're hearing on the streets around the Montreal Canadiens. And how often is Pierre-Luc Dubois' name mentioned these days on sports talk radio in Montreal? Is that still a big hot topic? Number 80 for as of right now, the Winnipeg Jets.
Is the apple of the eyes of Hab fans, the TNL Hab fans in the city. We spoke about Dubois. Remember when everyone thought he'd be dealt to Montreal in 2 seconds, and that never happened. Look, the reality is we know Pierre-Luc Dubois has a desire to be in Montreal. We know that, right? It's a question of who's going to blink first and what happens now moving forward. I think the Habs know that this is a critical off year for their rebuild. They have to improve. And the biggest knock on them was the injury bug that destroyed their season anyway, and what to do with some of the heavy loaded contracts. Brendan Gallagher, you wonder for Ken Hughes if he's going to have that conversation with Brendan, because, look, the Habs are not going to compete for a cup anytime soon. And for Brendan Gallagher, he's in the back nine of his career. And look, the city loves him for who he is as a player, but he's a broken down player at this point of his career. And not to say it as an insult towards his style, but it is what it is with him. I think the Habs have to figure out Joel Edmondson, what they're going to do with his contract, if they're going to offload him now or hold off till next deadline in February or early March, whenever the trade deadline might be. So there's a lot of question marks. And they have the 5th pick, which is sort of in no man's land, because you're not going to get the top end. You're not going to get Connor Bedard, Fantilli, all those guys, but can they get someone of great value? And the 2nd first-round pick, which is Florida's pick, many in the city thought it would be a lottery pick. Well, that's out the window now with where they're at in the playoff run.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, exactly. So this is going to be a critical year. I'm not saying it's a make or break for Ken Hughes and Jeff Gorton, but it's a critical year because this fan base was patient for this year. But, Andrew, in this city, hockey is a win-all here. And I wonder how much patience they'll have this year if they continue with what they did, not being great, being competitive but not great, knowing that it will be a lost year. So it'll be fascinating to see what they do for moves moving forward for this team to get better with veteran leadership, with goal scorers, and also allow their young guys to develop and hopefully become the core pieces down the road.
Well, I mean, there was a lot of talk, and it sounded like some people in the French media were trying to say, just go for it right now, trade the 5 pick for Dubois. I don't think that the Habs would really be interested in doing that. I'm pretty sure the Jets
would.
Oh, yeah. Well, listen, I think that would be a pretty short conversation and a yes. However, the concept of trading some sort of future capital to get Dubois in now, actually it makes the Habs. I mean, if you have Nick Suzuki, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Kirby Dach as your top 3 centers down the middle, I mean, to me, that's the spine of a team that, will be a problem for a lot of teams in the East and can actually get back to contending for a playoff spot. And I do wonder what the appetite is to maybe speed up the process at the expense of some future assets right now because of the season that they've had and the fact they've got a number 1 overall pick in Slafkovsky, presumably ready to play next year. The Montreal Canadiens, along with the Winnipeg Jets, one of the more interesting teams with a lot of options as we get to Nashville at the end of next month.
Yeah, the fascination will be that draft, what they do with that 5th pick. And people were praying, like, people knew in Montreal, like, there's a chance for Bedard, it wasn't going to happen. That if they get Fantilli, it'd be massive. Will Smith would be huge. And even Carlson for that matter. But I think now with that 5th pick, Michkov, do you want to take him? If Ken Hughes takes Michkov with that 5th pick, it shows as a sign that he's comfortable in his position, that he knows he's there for a while and can wait for Michkov to finally show up whenever he does, if he ends up being a Montreal Canadian. But I think now, moving ahead, the Carey Price situation will be sorted out eventually with what he's going to do. We all know he's going to retire. But, you're going into the training camp with Jake Allen perhaps as number 2. Montembeault is your number 1 guy. Are you comfortable with that goaltending duo? Caden Primo has not really lived up to expectations. The backcourt is potential, right? And the guy that they're praying for, he probably won't come this year, but will be there next fall, 2024, Lane Hudson, who had a monster year in the NCAAs this season. And they have high hopes that he could become, I'm not saying he's going to become Makar here, but he has those type of tangibles that can make you get off your seat and be like, oh my God, this guy is really good as a smooth skating defenseman moving forward.
Okay, I have to ask you this because this is a scenario that has been quite delightful just to kind of talk about here. But if Montreal feels that they can get Dubois anyways in a year as a free agent and don't feel the pressure to make a move, the Jets feel that they do need to make a move, how would it go over if Dubois ended up being traded to the Boston Bruins, who are going to have a couple of big holes at center? He likes it, signs long-term, and then is a pain in the Habs' ass for the next 8 years as a Bruin.
That would literally put a heart to shreds. Like, you remember Ralph Wiggum in the Simpsons episode when he professes his love to Lisa Simpson? I love Lisa Simpson. And then Bryce like, look at Ralph Wiggum's heart literally crushed to smithereens, right? That's what would happen to Montreal if Dubois went to the Boston Bruins. And you're right, Boston could be in play for him, right? With what they're going to have to do with their overhaul of veterans who might move on or retire or whatever it is. But I just think for Ken Hughes, and they're giving him the time, Andrew. They're being patient with them. And so far, things have worked out, right? The Kirby Doc deal worked out fairly well. Monahan deal did not work out well because he couldn't flip him for a number one pick. That was the plan, but never worked out in that situation. And Mike Matheson, that was a huge deal where they got off Jeff Petry's deal and got Mike Matheson in play. And he, even though he only played half the year because of injuries, he was phenomenal and really helped the back line evolve. So I think for Ken Hughes, can he do the same masterstroke and pull off those trades that could kind of bamboozle the other team and taking, whatever it is on their hands for better talent that might not be of high value. So I think right now for Ken Hughes and for Jeff Gordon, next month will be critical for them. The draft board will be huge, and who will they sign in free agency to kind of help this team stay afloat and be much more competitive than what they were last season?
Well, yeah, and the free agency, as we've kind of gone over the last few days, not a quality free agent class, which maybe is a good thing for the Winnipeg Jets with some players that they might be needed to sending out as far as when it comes to trade back. But yes, think about that. All-time great French center in Patrice Bergeron, replaced by Pierre-Luc Dubois in brown and gold. That would be, if Montreal doesn't want to play nice with the Jets, that would be the perfect scenario going forward in and around the draft.
It'd be a bleep you by the Bruins towards the Habs and even the Jets, right? I mean, to say, hey, you had a chance, but you said no towards Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Hey, they would have loved to have had the chance to sign him. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. So be a interesting few weeks around the National Hockey League. First things first, though, all the best to you on the call with the team in Montreal. Cannot wait to get going with some CEBL, and this was so much fun, Mo. We're going to have you back in the next few weeks to talk a little more hoops now that we got a seat at the table here at the CEBL.
Absolutely. Before I go, this is the prep work that I do for a CBL game right here. So this is what I do for a CBL game, and so this is literally what it is here. So there is so much information to be had, and I want to make sure that for both teams, they're well informed for the viewers to say, look, I come away knowing that this player played where and did this and did this. So I always take this seriously and call it straight down the middle here. So I can't wait to call tomorrow when Niagara comes to Montreal. And when Winnipeg comes July 3rd, I can't wait for that game. The Nordic battle between the Sea Bears and the Alliance. It's going to be massive for the
I'll tell you what, man, we'll hopefully if you've got some time outside of all that extensive prep for these games to jump on with us, we'd certainly love to do it. And, of course, talk some CFL with you as well. Mo, have a great weekend and a great call in game number 1. And watch out for the Winnipeg Sea Bears.
Can't wait, Bell. I can't wait. I look forward to conversing down the road, my friend. Take care.
Take it easy. There's our bud, Moe Khan. You can follow him on Twitter at Moe Khan 19 and check out TSN Plus for all the broadcasts of the CEBL. Mo will be on the mic for all of the Montreal games. All right. Got to get Remo in here and get to tonight's game. We can tell you that things did not go well in the matinee today for the Winnipeg Goldeyes. Kane County won today by a score of 3-2. So a night off for the Goldeyes, but back in action tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. when the Sioux Falls Canaries come to town for a 3-game series. You can get tickets at goldeyes.com and make sure to get there early, take a couple laps around the ballpark, get something to eat. And while you're there, You can also grab one of the new Little Brown Jug brews, the generic lager. Had one at the game last Friday for the home opener. It was great. Of course, the 1919 available as well. And a little later on, our friends at Little Brown Jug will also be featured in Craft Beer Corner. A busy weekend for Little Brown Jug because, of course, the patio is rolling right now. If you haven't checked it out down on William Avenue, you got to get there, especially with this beautiful weather. And as windy as it's going to be, it is somewhat sheltered, so it might be a great place to go for some patio beers on the weekend. And as we mentioned, if you're out at Food Truck Wars at Assiniboia Downs on the weekend, Little Brown Jug sponsoring the beer garden there as well. So lots of great options to get your LBJ on this weekend. As far as golf goes, they're at the Charles Schwab Challenge right now at Colonial Golf Club down in Fort Worth, Texas. And I'm not familiar with Harry Hall, but maybe I should be because he went 8 under today for a 62, a 4-shot lead over Hollywood Hoagie, Fargo's own Tom Hoagie, Adam Schenk, and Byung Han An. Sam Burns, defending champ Scotty Scheffler, amongst players in at 3 under par. Of course, our golf reports are brought to you by Breezy Bend Country Club. If you're thinking about a great long-term home for you and your family on a golf course with a great social scene, men's, ladies, and junior programs, Breezy's the spot. Waiting list is in effect for next season. If you'd like to find out more, get on that. Talk to our pal Corey Johnson at Breezy Bend or find out more online at breezybend.ca. And of course, it won't be long before we're putting lines in the water. Well, fishing season is on. Fishing season for me is when we get a chance to get out to Paradise in Manitoba, and that, of course, is Aikens Lake. There is nothing like the Aikens experience where you can be on the water, fishing a world-class lake with amazing guides and more in less than 2 hours from the city of Winnipeg. And as great as the fishing is, the only thing better is the hospitality from the Terren family and the entire Aikens team. Find out more online at aikenslake.com or hit Pitt Terren up on Twitter at Aikens Lake and find out about limited availability for the rest of this season or get planning a trip for next year. All right, let's get Remo back in here. And Reem, I don't know about you, but listen, Mo's one of our favorites. Everybody knows that. He's been so kind to join us talking Bombers, Alouettes, and hockey, what's happening with the Habs throughout. But I am really fired up for this hoops game and this season for the Sea Bears after talking to Mo.
Yeah, we've been counting down. They did the big jersey reveal yesterday. I love the colors, looking good, and it's going to be a packed crowd at Canada Life Center Saturday. So I'm excited to see how this goes, how the team looks, and nice to have another team possibly competing for a title here. So big, I don't know I actually don't know what to expect. It's an expansion team, but this is exciting to have another team here, Huss.
Chad Posthumus will be the big guy that everyone knows. Apparently, though, we have a guy, and we'll have a full report on this after we see the first game on Saturday, on Monday's edition. Mm-hmm. But I think the guy to watch is there's a guy named Teddy Buckets on the team. And if that is not one of the great nicknames that you could have, and a name like Teddy just goes so well with something like Buckets. So anyway, Saturday night, if you don't have tickets yet, there he is, Teddy Allen, a.k.a. Teddy Buckets from Phoenix, Arizona. And there it is, Instagram, teddy.buckets. We're going to have to maybe give him a follow.
I'll follow
from the
him,
WST.
Yeah. I'm on
and
it.
wish him luck for the upcoming year. I'm not sure if we're going to have Coolbet lines for the season for the CEBL.
No, but Sea Bears win totals.
I'll talk to. They've got leagues from pretty much all around the world, so we'll fire up the line to Coolbet HQ and see if we can get some CEBL games listed. One thing I do know that's on tonight is Game 5 between the Heat and the Celtics. Speaking of basketball, the Celtics avoiding the sweep with a win in Miami in game number 4 and now back at home, 8.5-point favorites and minus 323 on the money line. Listen, the Heat have been right in these games, especially they won both games in Boston. I think that's a big, big line. I'm still going to probably jump on the underdog with the points. But I think that Boston wins this game and gets it back for a game 6 in Miami that could, in fact, turn into basically game 7 for the home team, Reem. You'd have to think that if Boston can rattle off 3 in a row and get game 7 back in their barn, they could be the team to finally come back from a 3-0 deficit in the NBA playoffs.
Yeah, never happened in the NBA. I think Boston fans having memories of the Red Sox who came back on the Yankees. So we'll have to see what happens. One of these conference final series in the NBA or the NHL has to go at least a decent amount of games. You can't have all sweeps. So I know we had sweeps in 3 of them of the 4 series in both leagues, but credit to who? Boston putting the Heat here on blast as they.
Well, here's the question, and let's get over to the hockey game tonight because I locked this in for our daily pick and did the lock shop earlier today. Vegas was plus money, was plus 102. I see this line has dropped a little bit in favor of the Golden Knights, and now the Stars are just the slightest of favorites at minus 111, and Vegas is at minus 105. I think this one's over. Now, that being said, I'm ice cold right now. So maybe this is fade material and everyone should race to the book and bet the Dallas Stars. But I'm on Vegas tonight, Remo. I think they get it done.
I think it's over. No Jamie Benn. Dallas doesn't seem to have it. Jake Ottinger not bringing his A game. Maybe he does tonight, but I think Vegas takes it. And then we got a nice, week off here until the Cup final. June 3, Saturday is when it's scheduled to start. So we can sit here and look ahead to the draft or speculate about the Leafs GM or coach vacancies or whatever's going on with the Jets. It'll be right, and Bombers as well. Bombers, Seabirds. There's going to be a lot going on, but for the NHL, that could have a week off here.
Yeah, listen, I think both leagues could potentially have a week off. I did put together a Ride with Huss exclusive if you want to jump on. And again, I wouldn't normally do this, but I feel pretty good about this game tonight. I think Vegas wins. Jonathan Marchessault to get 3 or more shots on goal in the game. And Jack Eichel, the finisher, if you will, to score tonight. Eichel's plus 180 just on a straight goal prop. Marchessault to get 4 shots or more is plus 120. So I took that down to just 3. We've got an Eichel goal, Golden Knights to win. That is up right now at plus 600. So if you would like to ride, get in there. It's all up over at coolbet.com. You're riding with the Knights tonight, Reem?
I am. It's kind of funny. We talked yesterday about how Jonathan, what a story, looking ahead to storylines. Jonathan Marchessault, you have picked here on this prop 3+ shots, how him and Riley Smith were on the Panthers, and Greg Wyshynski was asking Marchessault about that. He said he thought he was going to be protected, but the Panthers opting to protect 4D, which included Alex Petrovic and Mark Pysyk. So they only were able to protect 4 forwards, and basically, they gave away Marchessault and Riley Smith's contract because they wanted to unload it. And those guys have, played pretty much. I think they played every playoff game for the Golden Knights since. Huge contributors. So just looking ahead to storylines, possible storylines in the Cup final that we'll have a week to talk about if Vegas wins tonight.
You bet. Tomorrow on the show, I think we'll have a visit from Billick. Kenny Weeb will jump on with us, and hoping to get Kirby Shep for a last visit. He's going to be heading out overseas working with Canada basketball for the next month. But he certainly knows a number of the players that will be suiting up for the Sea Bears. And just as someone that's so important in our basketball community, really looking forward to hoping getting his perspective on what this new teams means to basketball in Manitoba, but also to the youth sports teams, which will have some players on this squad when things get going on Saturday down at Canada Life Center. So, and of course, marbles as well. Don't miss marbles on a Friday here on Winnipeg Sports Talk.
Before we go, and some people were asking, people were asking us, how can youth sports players play in the CEBL? There is an agreement that does allow that, but I don't know if you're following the World Championships, but Canada advancing to the semifinal, beating Finland. We do have an upset alert. Listen to this. One of the biggest wins for their country in history. Latvia over Sweden.
Get out.
Yes. So it'll be Canada against Latvia in the semifinal, and USA will take on Germany, who beat Switzerland earlier today. So huge upset, 3-1 Latvia over Sweden.
So it's Canada, Latvia, and USA, Germany? Did I hear that right?
That's correct.
Wow.
Yes.
I'll tell you what, the one thing I know, and I mean, this event was hosted in Finland and Latvia.
Correct.
So I would imagine the Finns and the Latvians were probably playing home games in that. I'm going to be spending the next hour trying to find social media videos of the party in Latvia, because if you've talked to anyone that has spent time in Europe for the World Championships, the one thing that you can guarantee is that the Latvian fans are going to be flooring it from start until finish of the entire tournament. They have the rep as the most fun party crew in all of international hockey, and for them to have a win like that, that probably is the biggest win. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say that right off the bat. I'm sure there's another one maybe they have, but I mean, a home win to get to the semifinals of the World Championships. What a day for Latvian hockey, and obviously a very disappointing day for Finnish hockey, losing to the Canadians, who seem to be sort of getting it together after a slower start to the tourney.
Yeah, shout out to Latvian goalie Arturs Silovs, has 40 saves on 41 shots. Kristers Guzlevskis was the backup. You might remember him from the 2014 Olympics, where he had that huge game against Canada. Just looking through the Latvian team, shout out to former NHLers Kaspers Dogavens and Rudolfs Balsers.
Oh, Rudy Balsers.
I love the flashback names in this, whether it's the Spangler Cup or the Worlds. Nice to go down memory lane. I hadn't thought about Kaspers Dogavens for a long time, so I was pumped to see him on there. And yeah, Canada, they're finding their stride here. I think the team to beat us has got to be Team USA, led by Dylan Sandberg as their number 1D. They're 8-0, 8 goals against us. So watch out for Team USA.
Who's in net for the States?
That is a good question. Not Connor Hellebuck. I gotta be honest, like the Worlds are on when we're doing the show. I haven't paid too close. As Casey DeSmith was the goaltender today, and Cal Peterson was the backup. I mean, pretty light workload for DeSmith against who they played today. Czech Republic, who had Vejmelka in net. DeSmith only had to make 15 save shutout.
Oh, Vejmelka! I was listening to Merrick and Friedman, and I'm sure if SK's still here, he'll get going on this. But a potential that Lawson Krause and Clayton Keller, kind of want to find out what's happening with the future of the club. I mean, they're under contract. I'm not entirely sure what they can do. But they do have some hotshot young goalie that they think is sort of the goalie of the future. And if that's the case, maybe Vejmelka would be available. And I will say this, if Connor Hellebuck is traded, Karl Vejmelka would be the one guy in the National Hockey League that would come here, and I think fans would be incredibly excited as to the prospect of him being the next guy here in Winnipeg, just considering how amazing he's played against the Winnipeg Jets when people have actually paid attention to the Coyotes. Yeah,
when we mention Vejmelka, like people get really excited about him. I'm not sure why. Like I think he's just played well against the Jets and the Leafs, which helps. But I think overall, his body of work, I think he's like fine, but I don't know if he's like all-star goalie or anything. We'll have to. It is going to be interesting if the Jets do choose whatever they choose with Connor Hellebuck, and he's not the goalie, how that goalie plays, because we know Connor Hellebuck has had like the biggest workload over the last several seasons. Like, how do you replace him? And is the replacement going to be up to the task of facing all those high danger chances? Because we know Hellebuck has faced so many over the last bit, so they don't have a direct replacement in the pipeline. So that is one storyline we're following this offseason for the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, basically you're talking about getting 2 new goalies in. Whether they think that Big Save Dave would be able to take care of more responsibility and play more and re-sign him along with another guy. It's safe to say that if the Winnipeg Jets trade Connor Hellebuck, it leaves a massive, massive hole in the lineup that could take it could take a long time to replace, and I'm not sure you ever adequately replace it. And we're seeing right now with what Bob's doing in Florida, just how important goaltending is in the National Hockey League, especially the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Yeah, one other Winnipeg Jets off-season note, Huss. This was the big Jet story of the week. Congratulations to Nate Schmidt, Huss.
Yes.
Became a father. The Jets tweeting out the picture. Nice, fresh hospital picture here. Congratulations to Nate and Allie on the safe arrival of Harvey Schmidt. There he is there. Look at that.
The Harv.
And Nate Schmidt was spotted on Twitter. Some running group, I think in Assiniboine Park, ran into him, a bunch of kids, and got their picture with him. I think you retweeted that, Huss. I'll have to bring that up.
Yeah, that was cool. And I'm not sure. I think he actually came out for an event and did a little run with them or something like that. I'm not sure whether they just sort of bumped into him and
maybe
did
they bumped
that.
Into him.
But anyways, cool to see Nate do that in the community. And obviously a big congratulations to he and his wife on the addition of young Harvey to the family.
Good timing, Huss, having the kid in the off season. That's a smart move. Really intelligent.
That absolutely is. That's a professional right there.
Yeah.
So let's see if this is the middle of May. So June, July, August. So end of summer. That's when you got to make it happen, pros. And then you'll come in. Although I guess if the team was in the playoffs. Oh, yeah, here it is. Sprinting into Starstruck. Is that what it says?
Well, yeah, it says, I guess, I don't know. I guess they got they're sprinting and then became starstruck. I don't know.
I gotcha.
And then he says, loved it. Great to meet. But here's Nate Schmidt with some kids there for a run.
Good looking crew, young runners out at the park, and obviously making their day to meet Nate Schmidt. And I'll tell you what, if you could meet any, never mind Jet player, NHL player, if you're a bunch of kids, I don't think you could do much better than bumping into Nate Schmidt with the personality that he brings. And I'm sure it was a great moment for all of them. But yes, congratulations to the family on that. All right, let's get these pods up and see what happens tonight. Will we be officially talking about a Vegas-Florida matchup in the Stanley Cup final? We'll find out tomorrow, but I have a feeling we will be. Obviously, the latest on Bomber training camp and Sea Bears opening night on Saturday. So don't miss it. Marbles tomorrow as well. Thanks so much for being with us. Thanks to the sponsors that make this show happen every day. And folks, if you can, tell a friend about WST, how they can join the crew with us live on YouTube and chat, or where to find us on podcasts. Hit that thumbs up, by the way, if you can, and make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. Have a great night. Enjoy the weather, and we'll see you tomorrow for a Friday Marbles edition of WST.
Oh my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.